If you like the story, you can support the author on Patreon. Link is in the description.
Chapter 126, Guardians Only. The roars of these huge stone monsters were utterly terrifying. Inside the cave entrance, there were at least 300 adventurers, and more were still entering with supplies, weapons, and what looked like camping gear. But everyone stopped in their tracks when they saw those two massive stone monsters being bound by golden chains, with Prince Gilgamesh standing at the forefront. Just moments before, many considered him a nuisance. Bolt, who was in charge of the adventurers not part of any group, walked up to Rodolfo and asked him seriously, "You bastard, how come the exploration team didn't make contact with the enemy? We're at the entrance, right at the entrance. Without Prince Gilgamesh's help, we would have died without even knowing what hit us. Wasn't that your job?" Rodolfo looked at the enormous monsters and said, "It's not my fault. How were we supposed to know there were enemies right at the dungeon entrance? It wasn't even in the reports. The scouting team made no enemy contact, and neither did my group, which was supposed to be the vanguard. Don't blame me, you would have made the same mistake. Don't give me excuses. You've been causing trouble since long before we entered the cave. This incursion is cursed, all thanks to your stupid arrogance," shouted Bolt before releasing Rodolfo, who had no right to be angry. "Quiet down and watch. These types of monsters are classified as guardians and are protecting the dungeon entrance." Gilgamesh turned his head and asked everyone to remain silent. Then he looked at Roxy, who was still somewhat dazed, and said, "Their bodies are primarily composed of rocks. Do you have any spells that can damage their chests?" Roxy, who had recovered from the initial shock, nodded and raised her staff. She murmured an incantation out loud and shouted, "Compressed water sphere." Right in front of her, a massive water sphere formed, but its size began shrinking rapidly, compressing itself into a much smaller ball. After the spell finished, she launched it towards the chest of the first stone golem. Boom! The water sphere smashed against the stone golem's face, destroying it into 1,000 pieces. This prompted those who had believed these enemies to be invincible to calm down. They watched as the head of the stone golem began regenerating in less than 5 seconds. These darned monsters! Watching the stone golem regenerate its face, many adventurers wondered how to kill this thing while a chill ran down their spines. There weren't many records of stone golems, beyond the fact that they could be summoned by powerful, high-level mages. But since the first human-demon war, they had become rare, as if this spell had disappeared altogether. As guardians, these monsters were classified as a special kind, akin to wild dragons. Can that thing really do that? It's a monster summoned by a mage or a kind of spirit that feeds on magic to regenerate its body. If it's not destroyed entirely, like mythical ogres, it can regenerate. How do you expect us to destroy that massive giant? We need to find its power core, which is primarily located in its chest or stomach. Eris, try hitting it hard in the stomach. Gilgamesh wanted to somehow train Eris so that small things like these wouldn't shake her heart, which should be achievable through the experiences they have on this journey. Eris took a deep breath and said in a determined tone, "Leave it to me, I'm going to split it in two." What can a little girl do? That's what a normal person would usually ask, but everyone swallowed those words when they saw Eris draw a beautiful crimson sword that shimmered with a deep red hue. Calm down, you can do it, Eris." Eris thought to herself as she controlled her breathing and prepared to use her ultimate technique that she had been perfecting all this time, Lion's Jaw. This was the ultimate technique of the Golden Lion sword style, where the swordsmen concentrated all their power into a single strike, transforming the sword and the wielder's body into a giant golden lion's jaw that could devour the enemy, crushing them with a single blow. If you join the Uruk Tower, all of you can learn this fighting style, so see first how powerful you can become. Golden Lion sword style, Lion's Jaw. Boom! Eris's body exploded with a golden aura, her hair rose towards the sky, and the ground beneath her sank under the pressure. When she murmured the technique, her body shot forward, leaving a residual silhouette, and she swung the blade of her sword horizontally across the huge stone golem's body. Boom! The ground shook, the air felt the pressure of that powerful attack, and the stone golem, which had been hit by this massive blow, was destroyed from its core. Every part of its body seemed to lose life, its hands were destroyed, and the light in its eyes dissipated. "I did it, ha ha ha!" Eris went to celebrate with the astonished Roxy, who was deeply impressed by the attack she had just witnessed from someone smaller than her. What in the world is this incredibly strong sword style? The adventurers, at least those who were convinced of their fighting abilities, were severely affected by witnessing a demonstration by a young girl who could easily be the child of anyone in the cave. It was challenging to accept these results at first glance. Many, instead of feeling awe, felt fear deep within their hearts. Could they themselves learn that sword technique if they joined one of the Uruk towers? That sword style wasn't something regular, it was an extremely fierce art. If Gilgamesh hadn't been here from the beginning, everyone or the vast majority of them would have been crushed by an enemy that wasn't even the main threat in the dungeon. Of course, no one knew that the golems weren't invincible beings, only an enemy whose capabilities were unknown, and the element of surprise would have disrupted their battle formation, causing hundreds to die upon first contact. Do you want to give it a try? Gilgamesh directed a glance at Brutus, who was standing in front of everyone. He nodded and drew his sword. Northern God sword style. The man yelled while attacking the center of the stone golem's body at a speed that, for everyone, was not much inferior to Eris's. He successfully hit the core and destroyed the entire body of the golem with a single strike, which was indeed his ultimate move. As expected of a sword king. Praise came quickly. Eris, who observed the odd men, whispered to Roxy, "Strength is truly not something unattainable for everyone. Gilgamesh has good methods to make you even more incredible than the mages of the time, although it's strange that he never mentioned having a magic master like you. He must have been very apathetic because he missed you." Roxy smiled slightly and thought to herself, "He wouldn't remember me until he saw me, that's what he told me when we were kids, and I can say with certainty that he was right." Although it's not uncommon, some people are born with the ability to see the future, but being able to see into the past was unique to him. Now that the enemies are dead, we should wait for all the adventurers to enter and get ready. Gilgamesh could go alone, but that would be unwise on his part, considering that he was merely a guest from his perspective. Besides, he wanted to experience this journey into the unknown with Eris and now Roxy, his former mentor. Chapter 127, The Stone Door. Gilgamesh gently touched the stone door. This place had experienced many things unknown to all, but he could sense something that had likely occurred here. In fact, this place appeared to be a temple similar to the one Elaine had talked to him about. If this was a place where a god was worshipped, buried, or rested, Gilgamesh wanted to know if it had any connection to the human god that seemed to be wherever he went. Of course, all this searching was merely an effort, as he knew he would eventually find the answers. "Have you ever heard of a god called Hitagami?" Gilgamesh finally removed his hand from the stone door and asked Roxy, who stood beside him. Roxy cast a calm glance at Gilgamesh. She remembered that expression he wore when he wanted to ask something about which he probably already knew the answer. Everything was under the control of his eyes, he could always perceive much more than met the eye. "I'm aware of the existence of many gods, but none of them with the name you just mentioned." Many adventurers paid attention to Gilgamesh as he gazed at the stone door, and there was also a focus on Roxy, who was standing beside him. After her standout performance in the battle above, she had drawn much attention, and some believed she was exceptionally attractive. "Are you looking for a god named Hitagami?" The question Gilgamesh had posed was echoed by a person behind him, who stepped out from the crowd and approached slowly. He introduced himself as Anton. His expression seemed serious, and his body appeared somewhat reticent as he said, "I've heard about him. My father was a Blackwater adventurer, mainly dealing with seafaring. One day, he encountered a mysterious man who told him that if my father wanted to seek wealth, he should head to the lost island beyond the known continents." Gilgamesh turned his head toward the young man standing before him. Anton didn't stand out much, but he had courage deep within. "What more do you know?" Anton continued, "My father, when he visited that island, was the only one out of the 200 adventurers who returned alive. He kept talking about shadow soldiers, repeatedly mentioning that no one should challenge the authority of a certain dark god, or else we would all die. At the time, I thought he had gone mad. However, on his deathbed, he spoke only one sentence to me, 'Don't trust Hitagami, the deceitful god.' There were a few islands separated from the continents, but all of them were desolate. Nobody would be crazy enough to live on an island when they could live in a populous city where everything was more convenient, provided they had the money." Upon hearing this, many people exchanged glances, and except for Anton, nobody knew about this dark god, let alone Hitagami. If a god with that name indeed existed, they were sure everyone would think twice before trusting him. "You have words that interest me. If you know exactly where this island is located, you can mark it on a map and give it to me. I can give you anything you desire." Gilgamesh waited for Anton's response. Anton quickly requested a map, marked the location, and handed it to Gilgamesh. He then said, "If you can give me something, it would be the strength to avenge my father against those who did that to him." Gilgamesh examined the location marked on the map and then handed it to Eris for her to inspect. "If you're looking for power, head to any tower of Uruk. If you have the determination and talent, you can become a god of the sword. If you can reach that level, you'll be one of my most valuable soldiers. In that case, you'll receive a valuable treasure from me and can accompany me in the battle I'll unleash against that god. The same goes for all of you. If you want to seek more power than you currently possess, you can go to any tower of Uruk in the central continent. You're all welcome." Those who heard Gilgamesh's words clenched their fists. Who wouldn't want to be strong in this day and age? If they hadn't witnessed Eris's strength, no one would have believed these words, but they knew they were far from untrue. Consequently, some decided to return, as their lives were currently more valuable than any objects they might find in this place. "All right, I'll open this door, so prepare yourselves," Gilgamesh said, looking at Eris and Roxy, who immediately stepped back. Om. Gilgamesh's body emitted a powerful golden aura, and some barely visible red lines appeared on his body. He took a step back and, with a single strike, the entire cave rumbled as his fist struck the stone door. One blow was enough to crack and shatter the door entirely. Boom! Gilgamesh's powerful punch obliterated the door's strength and sent debris flying forward, creating a large-scale destruction that left everyone breathless. Even the god of combat couldn't throw a punch of such magnitude casually, especially considering that Gilgamesh still had the body of a developing child. Gilgamesh smiled and said, "All right, it's up to you whether you want to come or not. Remember that once you enter this cave, you'll be on your own. Let's go, Eris, Roxy, it's time to explore this mysterious place." "Let's go, Eris." Roxy took a step forward, her eyes filled with admiration for the interior of the stone door. Boom! The moment Gilgamesh stepped through the stone door, a change occurred. The inside of the door began to emit various lights. Layers of light intertwined and formed magical loops, creating 3 stone passageways. "I guess things are much more interesting than I imagined," Gilgamesh remarked as he faced the 3 passageways, contemplating which one to choose. "If we make a wrong choice, we might fall into a very troublesome trap," Roxy pointed out without any doubt that they couldn't escape it. Eris crossed her arms and suggested, "Let's go through this one. In the end, all the passageways might lead to the same place." The sudden opening of the door had made Gilgamesh's expression serious. When he entered this place, he had tried to look into the future, but there was nothing to show him. This was strange, as his ability was almost comparable to one that even certain gods didn't possess. So whatever lay inside was truly unpredictable. "I suppose I should get a bit serious," Gilgamesh said as he took out a long, white sword with exposed feathers. His gaze turned cold and calculating. After taking a step forward, he reminded them, "Follow behind me. Things don't seem to be quite normal." Despite having all his power, he knew from the last war that it was unwise to be overly confident when dealing with unknown entities, especially when he had 2 weaker individuals accompanying him on this expedition. "We must go, this is a unique opportunity. Yes, we should form 3 larger groups. As for the rest, they should stay at the camp and watch to ensure no enemies come out of these passages." The moment Gilgamesh brandished a mighty sword, Eris also raised her guard, and Roxy was ready to launch an attack at any moment. She could defend herself, so she would never be a burden to the others. "Don't worry. As long as you're with me, there's no need for you to make a move." Gilgamesh's words reached the ears of Roxy and Eris, who seemed nervous. Chapter 128, In Depth. There were many hidden things Gilgamesh needed to be cautious about if he didn't want to be taken by surprise. He was undoubtedly strong, but that wasn't everything on the battlefield. Gilgamesh knew this from experience, as he had perfected all his capabilities to be invincible. Being strong was the first step. The second was to be ruthless against your enemies, and the third was never to underestimate an opponent. With these 3 characteristics, one would be an unbeatable force on the battlefield. Roxy walked alongside Gilgamesh, holding her magical weapon, and said, "Unexplored places like these often harbor deadly traps over the years. After all, nobody wants their home or tomb to be visited by outsiders once they're gone from this world. Then, will we encounter wild beasts?" Eris's eyes gleamed with excitement. This was the first time she would have the chance to fight formidable enemies in dungeons. She had heard stories told by Ghislaine from her adventurer days, and they were all incredible. After advancing what seemed like kilometers, they arrived at what looked like an underground world. The path they had taken had led them to a place entirely different from where they had started. At the end of the tunnel, a desolate scene unfolded before their eyes. What they saw was an underground world, with towering mountains teeming with life and long rivers stretching across the ground. Taking in the entire view, this environment was no different from an enormous island that was devoid of human life. In this place, jagged mountains interlocked from top to bottom like slumbering giants. Here, the vegetation was so lush that thick roots seemed to reach the sky, while gigantic trees provided comforting shade. Faint animal voices were everywhere one could see. Each of their roars, growls, and songs seemed to announce their presence. It was as though this place had been spared any human intrusion, a unique sanctuary where life's most exotic creatures found refuge, sending shivers down the spines of many. Everyone who arrived in this place could feel the rich energy of nature. The sense of freedom here surpassed any other place many had visited. All of nature in this place was very dense, as if something magical caused this kind of sensation. After the first group of adventurers entered, another group arrived from a completely different direction. They were all thrilled to have discovered this place and to see in the sky the kinds of creatures they had never encountered before. If they could live here, this place would be an incredible one to die in. A hollow world beneath the sea. As he set foot in this place, even Gilgamesh was struck by how beautiful it was. It inexplicably reminded him of his friend in Ctto. There were many legends about the hollow world, and everyone inevitably thought they had found the marvelous place from the legends. But this place might have been created by a powerful being to separate this world from the outside, suppressing space and creating its own ecosystem. Some said this was the place where a god resided, which was why even dragons flew through the sky. However, in this place, the feeling of death was something that could be perceived as much as its nature. For Gilgamesh, this place could easily be another location where a higher being might live. This was another reason why he chose to enter, and he had no regrets about it. If he could find any traces of a god and it turned out to have some connection to Hitagami, he would take it upon himself to pulverize this place along with its enemies. Do not venture more than 1,000 meters from this entrance, the beasts in the sky and on the ground would surely kill us if we go further," said an experienced adventurer after seeing this area. Smart people were aware of their own strengths. Although there were many treasures and medicinal plants that could close their eyes to, it was extremely dangerous. When venturing into an unknown territory, the deeper one went, the more dangerous the creatures they would encounter. Some of these creatures might be powerful enough to kill even mighty sword kings. In truth, many powerful beings had entered mysterious places, and from their experiences, rules had been established that adventurous souls could not break. One of those rules was not to venture into an unknown place without first assessing the strength of the traps, beasts, and the nature of the area they were invading. Many had perished, even mighty sword kings, because they had not followed this rule. This is why many recognized their strength and dared not invade places from which they might not emerge later. No one knew how deep this unknown place went, but there were many places one could visit with the required skills. "Let's go," Gilgamesh told his two companions. Afterward, he conjured a magic carpet on which he, along with the others, sat and slowly flew around the area. Any creature strong enough that entered this land would feel observed by ferocious beasts hidden in this enormous forest. However, the moment Gilgamesh produced his magic carpet and sat at the front, all those watchful gazes vanished without a trace. One had to know that Gilgamesh had a very perceptible divine aura. No one in this place could oppose his path, let alone challenge him. Seated on the magic carpet, Gilgamesh, accompanied by Eris and Roxy, were the first to venture into the forest. This carpet is truly magnificent. With Gilgamesh's aura exposed, even the dragons avoided them, making their path smooth into the depths of the forest. Many people who saw him felt envious, but there was nothing they could do about it. However, some beasts were more curious than others, so they eventually approached slowly toward where Gilgamesh was heading. "If you want to step forward, then come and give me a bite. I will make sure to draw all your blood and prepare a rich blood ritual." Hearing Gilgamesh's words, many beasts bared their teeth, indicating they understood the meaning of the words they had heard. "Later, I will prepare a true blood ritual to enhance all the qualities of your bodies. The only problem is that your bodies can mature much faster while your age remains the same. The side effects would also be eternal youth, increased physical strength, and the reconstruction of your internal bones." Gilgamesh shared these words with Eris and Roxy, who had been silent for a long time. For them, there was nothing more to admire about what they were seeing. Sharing their thoughts could cause some kind of disaster that they would rather avoid, but Gilgamesh understood it was due to many other factors. After remembering my past in this world, I knew that in a way, my younger self knew things about my past life. It's complicated to explain, but somehow even before awakening in this world, my younger self knew about my future self, which is quite confusing when I think about it calmly. Gilgamesh said openly about his life without any problem. Come on, you can ask me any questions you're curious about, Gilgamesh said with a slight smile. Eris was the first to ask, why do you seek wives as if it were a problem for you to find someone to marry? Chapter 129, A Place with Water. Well, why would I do something like that? Gilgamesh seemed to think for a moment but not for long when he replied, I no longer want to die alone. I'm sure this is my last life, so I want to at least experience the feeling of starting a family. I don't mind if it's 1, 2, or 3 wives. In the end, the love I'm willing to offer has never been given to anyone else before. My eyes can see the future and the past, even though I haven't used that ability on you. When I woke up in this world, I could see a huge family waiting for me in a few years. The feeling I had was truly wonderful, and although you might think I'm a god, I'm just a simple human looking to lead a normal life. Roxy smiled slightly, expecting that response from Gilgamesh, so she just smiled when she heard that sincere answer. We still don't have the right to hear that part of your life, but it always feels good to reveal what you feel and what you can feel. Roxy's words made Gilgamesh remember those images he saw when he heard her say that she's his teacher, something truly unique that was most likely caused by his existence. The probability of change is very high, so any action he takes results in a different future that is always changing. My dear Roxy, don't say those words. In the end, you could become one of my companions, that can happen unless you don't want to. Even though I have the body of a child, my mental age is at least over 50 years, which is why I have respected Eris since I met her and established that marriage due to what I saw in the future. Although things are a bit different, the end result remains the same. Stop getting distracted by things that haven't happened yet, and stop using that ability, or it won't be interesting. Roxy and Eris didn't ask any more questions. They had heard more than enough from Gilgamesh, so their curiosity had been satisfied. Right, it may be a bit strange for you, but it's not for me. Gilgamesh said these words calmly while surveying the surroundings. Such statements were truly shocking. Eris should have been the most surprised, but her mindset and her preparation made her indifferent to these words. Since the beginning when she established her engagement with Gilgamesh, she considered him as hers, so nothing would change in the future, even if they get married in 5 or 6 years. She understood Gilgamesh's difficulties, having a superior mental age, and her being a child would seem very strange to others. But to Eris, to be honest, she doesn't care about any of this, although she greatly appreciates Gilgamesh for being so considerate and caring ever since they met. This only made her realize that Gilgamesh is incredibly superior to the average men one could find in life. In fact, he alone is synonymous with a true man worthy of values and dignity much greater than only very few can achieve in life. I'll increase the speed, hopefully, we can find answers about what this place is. Finally, under the calm gazes of Roxy and Eris, Gilgamesh increased the speed, disappearing into the depths of the forest. He had taken out this magical carpet due to its versatility in movement. He didn't want to use his Vimana because it needed serious modifications if he wanted to accommodate 2 extra people with him. There was only 1 throne, and although he could replace it with something more comfortable, he hadn't found anything to do so. Where are we heading? Seeing Gilgamesh with a clear purpose, Roxy was puzzled. If he weren't so young, she would have thought he had been here before. South. Gilgamesh responded while observing something in the distance as he sat on the magical carpet. From what I can see, we have entered a dangerous place with possibly beasts over 400 years old. If we keep advancing, they might attack us, so we should be careful. Eris looked around and said in a worried tone, those beasts are getting bigger and bigger, and although I have no doubts about our strength, isn't it risky? These are small creatures, there won't be any problem. I've heard that the largest beasts recorded in history can swallow an entire island without any problem. Aren't we going to a very complicated place? Roxy began to get more nervous. These creatures appearing in front of her were getting larger and more dangerous. Wouldn't it be better to use the other flying device that has a magical shield? Eris started making suggestions as the situation became increasingly critical. Gilgamesh, sitting at the front, said confidently, this thing also has a magical shield, although it's half as strong, not even a god can break it. Gilgamesh's words reassured Eris and Roxy, but they still had pale faces. You have to know that Gilgamesh is most likely even stronger than a sword god, but the monsters appearing had been extinct for thousands of years. What they were looking at now was history, something that could both delight and frighten many. Gilgamesh's magical carpet traveled at increasing speed towards an unknown location. It's true they had invaded the territory of very powerful magical beasts, and maybe these monsters had already noticed them. However, when they felt Gilgamesh's sinister intent to kill, no one dared to stand in their way. Compared to the sacred beasts Gilgamesh had once eliminated, these small wild beasts were far below that level. After rushing into an even more deserted area, Gilgamesh stood up and said, "It seems there are many more beasts here, and I should be more careful, but it's no problem." Indeed, at that moment, the aura of a very powerful fierce beast began to saturate the air. Everyone who felt that aura felt their souls splitting in two, and it left them breathless. That's a huge beast. Eris and Roxy were shocked when they saw that gigantic turtle flying through the air, its enormous body radiating an unimaginable amount of magic. How can something like that exist in this world? Get out of my sight, or I'll turn you into less than ashes. At that moment, Gilgamesh pointed his sword at the turtle and said authoritatively. For a brief moment, his celestial aura was released unrestricted, spreading like a golden mantle all around. Each of his red marks appeared on his body, and his monarch's aura oppressed even nature. I won't cause trouble, I've only come to hunt a corrupted beast, so don't get in my way. No matter who they were, in front of Gilgamesh's monarch's aura, no one could stand in his way. Even those who called themselves gods would feel a terrible suffocating situation. Eris and Roxy only felt Gilgamesh's aura expanding, and they sensed a sweetness but nothing more than that. On the other hand, all those who were external beings suffered a terrible sense of death. Chapter 130, Sacred Ground. How is it that you have absolute control over your power to such an extent that you can scare those ancient beasts? Seeing what Gilgamesh could do with just his words, Eris became so excited that the arrogance she had hidden due to nervousness left her body. It should be known that the aura used by Gilgamesh was unique due to his divinity, there was no magic or battle aura like others believed, which was astonishing in a few words. Although Eris and Roxy could avoid being affected by this aura, others might have felt their hearts stop beating and their souls crushed by a pressure they couldn't resist. The monarch's aura that Gilgamesh released was something even powerful kings would never have in their lifetime. What he had just unleashed was the will of millions of humans supporting his advancement into the enemy ranks, their souls were with Gilgamesh, supporting their king. The beasts on the earth lowered their heads, feeling the blessing of nature in Gilgamesh's energy, thanks to a certain blessing that Enkidu had left in his wake. Everyone understood that the man standing before them was unique and could not be bothered under any circumstances. In fact, for Gilgamesh, this was not surprising at all. He was intimately familiar with life, and during a period of his life, he had traversed places as vast as a continent, encountering creatures as immense as the stars. Therefore, it was not difficult for Gilgamesh to release his aura and drive these creatures away. The magic carpet flew through the forest, heading towards the presence that Gilgamesh had detected earlier because he didn't want to cause disturbances in this place. So, to avoid causing any trouble, he proceeded as quickly as possible. Finally, they hadn't covered much more ground when they reached their destination, only to see a massive tree that blotted out the sky. This tree was unbelievably huge, beyond human imagination. Its base pierced all the ground of this place hidden beneath the sea, and its roots extended effortlessly in all directions. In the sky, this enormous tree was like a giant umbrella, towering over mountains thousands of kilometers away. This immense tree amazed everyone, even Gilgamesh, because even one root of that tree was as long as a river. What was more incredible was that there was a waterfall at the top of the tree. How was this still a tree? Measuring millions of meters in height, its height surpassed the sky. For anyone who could reach this place, that view would be the most beautiful they would ever see for the rest of their lives. When the magic carpet arrived at a crevice in the middle of the tree, they felt an immense relaxation. This sensation was as if all their worries had vanished, and their bodies yielded to this comfortable feeling. Earlier, Gilgamesh had passed through a very dangerous area, and even though those fierce beasts didn't approach, Eris and Roxy were still alert to any strange movements that could be from the enemy. However, at this moment, under the tree's canopy and its extensive shadow, everyone felt at peace, as if they had returned home. Everything seemed as if the most powerful beasts dared not approach this place, the nearest radius to this tree seemed to repel them. This place was nothing more than a sanctuary where one could live in peace. There was no distinction between beasts on the earth or creatures in the sky. Entering the tree's crevice, Gilgamesh significantly reduced the speed and silently began to move slowly. Here, the scene was even more serene than in the surroundings, providing even more peace to the people. This place was a safe haven. Even common animals came to this place to graze without a care, while green birds flew amid the leaves hanging from the surroundings. The surroundings outside the central area of the gigantic tree were highly dangerous. But the exterior and interior of this place were completely different. In one step, you were in hell, while in the next, you were in heaven. In a matter of minutes, they were all in the depths of the tree. There were beautiful meadows with vibrant medicinal plants, small trees laden with juicy fruits, and even clear pools of water that seemed endless. With birds singing peacefully, it was as if nothing from the outside world mattered. Is there a more beautiful place in the world? In a short period of time, Eris and Roxy didn't know what to say in the face of such breathtaking views. One must know that no one would dare set foot in this territory without encountering beasts that were centuries old. If a regular person tried to pass through that area, it would be tantamount to seeking death. However, here in the deepest part, there was sacred ground. How did you know about this place? Roxy asked Gilgamesh in astonishment and with a perplexed look. Gilgamesh laughed and said, I calculated a day ahead with the stars. Then, he immediately leaped off the magic carpet. Both girls accompanying Gilgamesh were fascinated. Everyone believed that this place was one even the holiest of creatures would not set foot on. Do you want to undergo the blood ritual as well? You need to know that the effects will be unknown, but they won't be negative. On the contrary, they will enhance your body, make you stronger, and various aspects of your body might develop further, such as magic, your senses, and strength, Gilgamesh asked Roxy at this moment. I wouldn't mind being stronger, but do you really want to do it? Roxy inquired. It's not a problem. I need to develop my physique to the fullest once and for all, Gilgamesh replied as he began unpacking various large and small items, all of them meant for setting up camping tents in this place. There were many things they could do here, so they would obviously spend more than a day in this location. Furthermore, Gilgamesh was planning to claim this domain as his own once he thoroughly investigated the surroundings of this place. I need you to dig a hole with magic. It should be square and deep enough for someone over 1.5 meters tall to walk through comfortably. After that, harden the bottom and the walls so that no liquid can seep through, Gilgamesh instructed Roxy while preparing the items he would need. Roxy didn't understand the reason, but she followed Gilgamesh's orders to the letter and began altering the grassy earth. After forming a square deep and large enough, she hardened the walls and the bottom, then gave it a bit more shape to make it much easier to enter. Gilgamesh, after assigning Eris the task of setting up the camp tents, started inspecting the surroundings to ensure that there would be no issues during the ritual that would make his body mature. No one knew what Gilgamesh was doing, but seeing his serious expression, no one dared to speak to him. Back and forth, in the sky and around the area, Gilgamesh made sure that everything was in order, and after confirming that there was nothing to worry about, he returned to the base of the tree. Chapter 131, A Blood Ritual. After this, Gilgamesh began preparing the materials for the blood ritual, in which they would all undergo a profound transformation in their physical abilities and much deeper changes related to magic. The fluids Gilgamesh was preparing were something special that only he knew about, so before he went in search of a special beast to use its blood, he prepared the essence that would enhance their physical abilities and, most importantly, what he desired. I will finally be taller. Gilgamesh murmured as he continued to use magical stones and other materials he found in his gate of Babylon. It seems there are good beasts here that we can use for the blood ritual. The only problem would be the effects it would have on Eris's body. As he thought about this, Gilgamesh concluded that he needed to prepare something separate for Eris and first focus on her growth. Although it was unlikely that she could endure the entire time required to address the medicinal effects, she could at least gain significant benefits to boost her strength and growth more suitable for battle. But upon further consideration, it would be wise to limit her growth since her mental age was still young. There were many things she needed to experience, so Gilgamesh deemed it unsuitable for her to undergo the physical changes he planned to make. Therefore, he decided on several different blood rituals. I'll be back, I'm going to get the main ingredient for the rituals. Gilgamesh disappeared after saying that, leaving Eris and Roxy alone. It's incredible, isn't it? Eris dipped her feet into a puddle of water and said, I never thought Gilgamesh would regain his memories of his past life. It was a bit surprising when I first heard it. Yes, that was quite surprising. I met him when he was younger, and he was a genius at whatever he pursued. For him, barriers didn't exist, and he could be the best at anything he set his mind to. He talked to me about his memories from his past life and expressed concern, thinking that the chances of him finding a wife were slim, so he supposedly chose me as a candidate. Roxy smiled as she recalled the young Gilgamesh. Eris nodded as she listened to Roxy's story. Roxy, who had a delicate appearance, seemed to be quite open with her acquaintances. Was there anything special in his choice of you? Roxy shook her head and said, there wasn't, perhaps he saw something in me that wasn't easy to find in other people. During that time, I taught him magic, all the magic I knew back then, and when our paths were about to separate, he told me that when his memories fully awakened, he would forget about me. Eris's heart squeezed with sadness upon hearing this poignant story. She couldn't help but imagine the sorrow Roxy must have felt knowing that her student would forget her after their parting. She truly didn't wish that upon anyone, especially not someone dear to Gilgamesh. I suppose you've traveled to many places. Have you ever thought about getting married? Gilgamesh jokingly told me that he would marry the first 3 women worthy of all his love, although it's certainly much better that way since when he becomes a king, he'll need many descendants. Eris was very open about this topic and didn't feel embarrassed discussing it, given her noble background. Roxy tightened her grip on her staff and said, I have an idealized image of a man, but I've never experienced anything romantic before. I guess that's because I've been deeply immersed in magic since I became a sorceress, so something like a relationship is the last thing I've thought about. In the end, everyone focuses on their initial goals before falling in love. I suppose that's the case in most situations. Eris wondered what would have happened if she hadn't become engaged to Gilgamesh and said, but it doesn't matter. I'd like you to be one of those 3 wives, as I've grown very fond of you. I hope our friendship blossoms to the point of being like sisters. Roxy was surprised for a moment. Then, she understood what was truly happening in the nobility and that Gilgamesh was interested in becoming a king. After a few seconds of thought, she said, I don't know yet, it's not something that typically happens overnight. Eris smiled and said, that's true. We should have something to eat before Gilgamesh returns. I have some very good chocolates in my bag. I like chocolates. A few hours later, Gilgamesh had returned with large quantities of blood, and his body was obviously covered in it when he returned. Therefore, the first thing he did was wash off the blood with the readily available water. Upon his return, he saw Eris and Roxy engaged in friendly conversation, and he smiled, realizing that they had gotten to know each other much better. All right, Eris, your blood ritual will begin in a few seconds. Gilgamesh poured the blood into a large container and warned, remember, don't push yourself too hard during the transformation, and ask for my help when you want to stop. Eris showed a serious expression and said, no problem. After helping Eris step into the container filled with blood, the effects began to take place, and she, who had appeared calm, soon clenched her teeth in pain. Is it that painful? Roxy cast a thoughtful look at Gilgamesh, who was closely monitoring any changes. Upon hearing this question, Gilgamesh said, blood rituals are an ancient and powerful form of enhancement. It's said that these rituals have the ability to reconstruct the bodies of mages or warriors, removing wounds and scars. Additionally, they can purify the soul, eliminating spiritual impurities that afflict practitioners. The rituals also provide an improvement in physical strength, dramatically increasing the capacity of those who undergo these procedures for enhancement. Not only that, but the senses of those participating in these rituals sharpen, allowing them to perceive the world at a deeper level. Finally, accelerated growth is one of the most astonishing rewards, as it allows the younger ones to develop their strength, battle senses, and, on some special occasions, their bodies, reaching their full potential in a short time. Eris, who was writhing in the liquid, soon experienced a series of bone cracks, and her head began to emit a kind of abnormal energy. She clenched her teeth and endured as long as necessary to harness the costly components used in these types of rituals. Gilgamesh shook his head as he pulled Eris, who had fallen asleep, out of the liquid and said, she's so stubborn, she should have come out earlier if she felt so much pain. After taking Eris to the lake to clean her blood-covered body, Gilgamesh returned her to a quiet spot for her to rest. Upon his return, he saw Roxy looking at the hole in the ground and asked with some hesitation, are we going to do this together, without clothes? Gilgamesh thought for a moment and said, nothing will happen. I'll be on the other side, and I promise to keep my eyes closed until the ritual is over. While we're apart, the effects will be the same, and we'll finish faster before the medicinal effects wear off. Okay, well. Roxy watched as Gilgamesh undressed and, without looking at her, entered the red liquid right in front of her. Don't worry, I won't look, and besides, the liquid completely covers our bodies. Roxy hesitated for a moment but ultimately removed her clothes and entered the blood ritual. If Gilgamesh is telling the truth, this ritual would enhance all aspects of her body, and perhaps her complex of being small might end today. However, after a few minutes, Roxy started feeling very strange beyond the pain and the cracking of her bones. What's happening to me? Chapter 132, Something Went Wrong. Gilgamesh remained calm, almost in a daze due to the rapid growth of his body when he felt a soft hand caressing his chest. This strange sensation made him think he was in a dream, a type of common dream that could happen anywhere. In his previous life, there was a time when he was with women, experiencing all the pleasures life could offer, but it was never anything sentimental. This time, after so long without touching something so soft and delicate, he was excited. These are the side effects of body reconstruction. Ah! Gilgamesh, who was letting himself be carried away by this strange yet alluring sensation, heard a soft moan that sounded like a whisper of disdain. It was so real that it startled him, but after that, it seemed like there was no turning back. His hands, body, and sensations were carried away by the ecstasy of this distant feeling he was experiencing. Somehow, as the minutes passed, Gilgamesh's perception became increasingly vivid, and when he opened his eyes, he saw a startling scene. How did this happen? Ah! What went wrong in the blood ritual process? It should have been the same process as in any other blood ritual, but when Gilgamesh was looking for a clue to this, he immediately realized what was wrong. The blood he used was not the same as the blood in Eris's blood ritual. He had used less potent blood so that his body wouldn't grow exponentially, and she could return to her parents in a state similar to when she disappeared. When he performed the second ritual, the blood used in his and Roxy's blood ritual was from a different beast. There wasn't much information about blood rituals, but normally, the blood used in rituals was preserved for a long time, so it wasn't fresh. But this time was different. Not only was the blood he used fresh, but he also used large amounts of magical materials. If, for some reason, the creature he used for this ritual was in its mating season, its blood effects transferred to his and Roxy's bodies, which explained what was happening now. This displeased Gilgamesh greatly, but it was a natural occurrence, so he didn't stop it. Somehow, he felt bitter. He wanted none of this in his life, and right now, things didn't go as expected. Since the time he saw his future with Eris, he decided not to use his ability to see the future and the past in women anymore, but things changed a bit when Roxy appeared in front of him, announcing that she was his magic teacher. The things he discovered were very beneficial, but he somehow didn't see much of the future. Although his way of choosing a wife wasn't anything special, he knew right now that this was a clear mistake. He had promised to change, to be calmer and not to act harshly in front of others. Although that wasn't considered in the first days when he regained his memories, he knew that something like this was unacceptable, even though he liked it. Not only would it hurt Roxy's feelings if he were to say that this was a mistake, but it would also distance her and end something that had just begun. Moreover, now that he and Roxy had given themselves physically, as a responsible and fair person, he would marry her. At least Eris was asleep. Considering Roxy's age, he knew that this issue could be resolved with maturity. However, that persistent barrier between him and Roxy bothered him a little for what was about to happen next. He wasn't romantic at all, he could sense things, but something like these ridiculous things wasn't his style that could happen in a relationship. This wasn't something I expected. Gilgamesh looked at Roxy's flushed face while things somehow kept flowing. Just don't talk. You make it more embarrassing. Roxy's sensual voice whispered in Gilgamesh's ear, arousing something that had been dormant within him. Then I'll be a bit more considerate. When the effects of the blood ritual faded away amidst passion and mixed feelings, Gilgamesh and Roxy gazed at the magical sky above their heads without saying a word. You've grown taller, Roxy. Gilgamesh had seen it all, and Roxy's height had changed, along with some parts of her body, in addition to her magic, developing a bit more. In the perfect combination of beauty and height, Roxy was an angel who had fully blossomed. She felt embarrassed. She had wanted to ask Gilgamesh for help when she felt her body growing hotter, but when she got close enough to him and saw his developed body, her hands moved on their own, and something happened that she had never thought of doing before. Obviously, this was a mistake, but she didn't want to say it out loud because she feared feeling bad when she heard what Gilgamesh would say about it. But when she saw him so calm and confident and giving her that trust to open up, she said with a soft voice, I thought you would grow, but now you're in your adult version. Are there any consequences besides the accelerated growth? Gilgamesh, who was now nearly 6 feet tall, with a highly developed body and not overly exaggerated muscles, responded calmly, age is not affected, I needed this body to use my armor and have the best conditions to fight the human god I'm looking for. Roxy fell silent for a moment and then said in a hesitant tone, what just happened shouldn't be taken too seriously, I don't think it's a problem, so let's just consider this as a. We'll get married. Our ages aren't too far apart, so if you're willing, I have no problem marrying you. Gilgamesh stood up and walked confidently toward Roxy, giving her absolute assurance that he wasn't lying. That's very extreme, things usually happen, and many don't end up getting married without knowing each other well. Roxy blushed upon hearing that Gilgamesh was willing to marry her. Although she was happy to hear those words, she didn't want to force Gilgamesh, who was committed to Eris. I may be different from my past self, but I know you perfectly. Gilgamesh reached where Roxy was and said, you're a very kind person who cares about the people around you. I also noticed that you are very loyal to your loved ones, and I have no doubt that you would do anything to protect them. Despite being a powerful mage, you demonstrate humility on every occasion and I've never seen you boast about your abilities. Gilgamesh's words perfectly described Roxy, who seemed to be in a trance, looking at the man in front of her. Since we first met, you've always been willing to learn from a child, and improving your skills is something that motivates you. Gilgamesh bent down and lifted Roxy as he looked into her eyes. Wait a moment, I don't think it's necessary to do this. We're going to shower in that lake, don't be shy, my dear Roxy. There's nothing we haven't seen before. Roxy wanted to slap Gilgamesh in the face for his lack of consideration, but after feeling his calm gaze conveying confidence, she stopped being shy and rested her head on his chest. What else could happen? Chapter 133, A New Day. It was a long night for both Gilgamesh and Roxy, and they both had new experiences in this world that made them feel in completely different ways. Should I worry about something so trivial? Gilgamesh wondered as he stood in front of the giant tree, wearing only half of his golden armor, baring his chest. What had happened the night before wasn't very significant for him, but it was clear that for someone like Roxy, it would leave a lasting mark. In this regard, Gilgamesh, being a good man, would take full responsibility for the situation no matter what. I might have one of my children, and even if that doesn't happen, I won't be able to let you go with another man after I was the first in your life. That way, I'll take complete responsibility, and we'll get married in the future, said Gilgamesh, dispelling thoughts that shouldn't have bothered him so much. Why did I grow so much? Eris shouted from her tent, touching only her breasts and then came running out, showing them to Gilgamesh, who had found his peace of mind. Your body should have developed to about 17 years old, it's not much considering I reached full maturity. Gilgamesh looked at Eris, who was acting strangely. Eris, with a red face, said, then you can have my body whenever you want. You're still no more than 12 years old. Get out of my sight and let's get ready to explore this place. Gilgamesh immediately put an end to Eris's intentions, giving her a more important task to do. Eris frowned as she looked for her clothes. Are you sure you're a man? You'll find out when we get married. By the way, your clothes probably won't fit you anymore, so let's see if I have something in my inventory that can work for you. Gilgamesh set aside Eris's behavior and searched for female clothing that would fit her new body. After a while, Gilgamesh found a set of female armor that suited Eris's body type and said, I found this, a good set of armor for your fighting style, so there should be no problem. This is amazing. Eris didn't seem to care that she had grown, she was just excited at the thought of being able to get married at any time. Roxy was the last to wake up, feeling her body different. However, when she remembered the events of the previous night, her face turned red, but she had made a decision. As she exited her tent, she looked at Gilgamesh in his beautiful golden armor and Eris, who couldn't stop swinging her sword. Seeing them so ordinary, she walked toward the water. I've prepared something to eat, we'll move on once we've finished, Gilgamesh said as he checked that the food at least tasted good. My goodness, Roxy, you've grown too. Eris ran over to Roxy without realizing her own speed and gave her a big hug. Yes, it seems like many things have grown, Roxy said awkwardly while being embraced by Eris. I can see that, they're bigger than the last time I looked at them, Eris murmured as she pressed her face against Roxy's chest. This woman. Gilgamesh muttered, watching Eris with zero embarrassment as she made those comments. Although the relationship between Eris and Roxy was still developing, they seemed to get along very well beyond the ordinary. Perhaps it was because Eris didn't mind how many wives Gilgamesh had, what was important was getting along with them and somehow harmonizing the relationship. Moreover, as Gilgamesh's first betrothed, she was in a prime position and had to take the initiative in finding wives for the future king of Ashura. She had heard from Roxy that if things hadn't developed the way they did, Gilgamesh probably wouldn't have obtained a wife. Maybe deciding not to become king at first changed something in his future, but that was the best thing of all, according to Eris. As they ate, Gilgamesh took out a magical staff that was actually a noble phantasm of an offensive type. It had the ability to boost magical spells and even cast divine attacks. When Roxy received this beautiful magical staff, she also received a portion to increase the mana reserves in her body. This staff is incredible. Eris looked at Roxy's excitement and said, Gilgamesh only gives incredibly valuable and irreplaceable swords and items to his wives, subordinates who are gods of the sword and magic. No one else receives such powerful gifts. Finally, after receiving so many comments from Eris, who seemed to be looking for something specific, Gilgamesh said, Eris, your skills are probably already above that of a sword queen, I would even say you've reached the level of a sword emperor. But you still need experience and better control of your body's abilities. As for you, Roxy, your magical abilities remain the same, but now you could even aspire to learn divine spells. Magic of the king, emperor, and even god. The potion in your hand will enhance your entire body, and the abilities you'll have will be unmatched in this world. Roxy smiled calmly and said in an honest tone, I can't quite understand what's so special about me for you to say you're willing to marry me. I also don't mind that you have other wives, so since you're willing to do it, I'll accept. So quickly. Eris, who was eating chocolates, gave Gilgamesh a suspicious look, as if her expression asked if something had happened while she was asleep. So that's what happened. Well, what more can you do? Really? Roxy seemed surprised by Eris's reaction and asked, shouldn't you be upset? Eris shook her head and said, Gilgamesh said he wouldn't marry more than 3 women, and you and I are 2 of them, so the third one is probably that elf named Elaine. Should we be discussing that right now? Gilgamesh, who had been excluded from the conversation, was met with angry expressions from both women. He shook his head and summoned his Vimana. Will the king be tamed in this world? It cannot be. I must demonstrate my authority when I reach the required battlefields. Gilgamesh displayed a smile full of arrogance as he donned his full armor. Seated on his Vimana, Gilgamesh looked at Eris and Roxy, who were still chatting, and told them, come on, we need to get out of here. Hey, Gilgamesh, I think I might be able to defeat you now, Eris said as she sat on one of Gilgamesh's legs, with Roxy on the other. Both of them had ignored Gilgamesh's serious expression. All right, I wouldn't mind for something like this, Gilgamesh said, secretly smiling at such hidden rewards. As long as these women continued to challenge his authority, his obsession would only grow stronger. Today, we're going to find out what's in this place. Eris was simply screaming with excitement as she marveled at the incredible sights while flying on the Vimana, feeling the gentle breeze seeping through the magical shield that surrounded her. Chapter 134, The Divine Tree. Wouldn't it be incredible to live in this place? Eris exclaimed. Hearing Eris's words, Roxy commented, if we could use teleportation magic, maybe we could, but coming here by boat would be incredibly tiring. We could create matrices, I think my spirit servants might be able to help with that. If we manage to make this place ours, all we'd have to do is seal the entrances and isolate this place from the outside world. Gilgamesh said these words without knowing if they would work. Do you have that kind of forbidden magic? Roxy's question left Gilgamesh in silence, and after thinking about it, he said, I understand that for obvious reasons, magic is forbidden, but within my realm and the things that are mine, there is absolute individual creation of magic. No external law, even if it's created by a dragon god, will influence my decisions. That's not how the world works. Eris smiled as she watched the enormous birds fly by and said, training and living here would be a great experience. The knights still in training should be trained here. We could also bring in some good people to take advantage of the abundant fertility of this place for food production. If you want to follow the path I tread in this place, you should know that palaces as beautiful as these are nothing to be surprised about. I have some very beautiful relics that this world has never seen, so as long as my reign can be established, you will enjoy better things by my side. For Gilgamesh, beautiful things were a part of him. Something as simple as a beautiful place could be suitable for establishing a floating castle and the main headquarters of his knights, but it was only something that could be taken advantage of in that way and was not overly extravagant. In his past life, he had enjoyed unimaginable wealth, lived in palaces made of gold, and adorned with the most extravagant jewels. Luxuries were something he had never stopped enjoying, so he felt he should, in a way, show those experiences to his future wives. Eventually, Gilgamesh moved away from the enormous tree that seemed to pierce the sky. He had his own purpose for leaving that place, so he didn't take long to move away. Before taking this place as his own, he needed to know exactly who had created this place. Gilgamesh had perfected his skills, so he didn't care if other people were by his side. Even the people accompanying him didn't know his true potential, the extent of his strength, and there might not even be a need to show it. Roar! However, just after moving a few kilometers away from the tree, they encountered a massive flying beast. At this moment, a creature resembling a huge eagle was blocking Gilgamesh's path. Its size was similar to that of a dragon, and blue lightning covered its body. It exhaled frigid vapor at an extremely low temperature. If someone were to be attacked by this beast, very few would be able to do anything about it. This creature is truly formidable, Gilgamesh murmured with rapt attention, admiring the creature. This beast could be between 300 to 400 years old. The amount of time it must have spent surviving in this place amidst the food chain's crisis is unimaginable. Roxy seemed to be better informed, while Eris just exclaimed in excitement. Gilgamesh looked at the creature and said dominantly, "Just a simple beast that has lived longer than normal. I see it has value in its eyes to dare to come out and face me. Creature, I know I might appear as an invader in your perception, but be smarter and get out of my sight, or I will kill you." Boom! However, the Thunder Eagle raised its beak in a threatening manner, flapped its wings, and prepared to attack. "It looks like it's going to attack us." Eris didn't feel afraid, even though she had seen how powerful the Vimana's shield was. Roxy, on the other hand, said, "Maybe it wants to gauge its strength against us, they often do that naturally." Boom! After accelerating, the Thunder Eagle flapped its wings and headed directly toward Gilgamesh at full force. Undoubtedly, the impact could easily shatter the tip of a mountain. From what they had seen, the Thunder Eagle was a contact-fighting creature, and in its dominion, its speed and power were extreme. Its offense was simple and direct. Once someone was caught in its close attack range, its huge body would be surrounded by blue lightning, and it would attack with terrifying speed from the front. The striking power of this flying beast was incredible, but Gilgamesh was even more terrifying because with just an outstretched hand, an enormous lance that made the earth tremble appeared from a golden ripple. When the tip of the spear was revealed, the entire air was filled with a horrifying bloodthirsty intent. "Then try this." Boom! Finally, with a simple attack using the massive spear, Gilgamesh accepted the duel with this ferocious creature. Upon impact, the Thunder Eagle's body was thrown backward when it collided with the spear's tip. Its body had been pierced, showing severe signs of injury, but the beast didn't have time to unleash a horrifying roar before the spear had pierced through its entire body. In the end, the Thunder Eagle's body fell to the ground while the enormous lance disappeared from everyone's view, returning to Gilgamesh's treasury. There were signs that it had died, which was normal considering the severe wound it had suffered. A massive beast wasn't something that could harm Gilgamesh, who had faced divine beasts specially created to eliminate him and had won without much effort. "Do you want to bargain your strength with me?" Gilgamesh approached the monster in his Vimana and said, "Don't feel sorry for the enemy. Look at its condition and think about how we would fare if we weren't strong enough. Shall we take its blood and meat? They usually sell for a good price." Roxy suddenly spoke, showing her adventurer knowledge. "It's not necessary. Other beasts will eat this corpse when they find it. We have better things to do, so let's go." In the end, Gilgamesh, who had ceased to be so bloodthirsty, didn't mean he would show mercy to the enemy. His motto was to crush and kill. Chapter 135, Inside. After continuing to advance at a moderate pace, various creatures of different appearances appeared in the air, trying to keep up with the Vimana. The roars of the monsters grew louder and louder, coming dangerously close to Gilgamesh's group. "These wretched creatures have no value, they're not even fit to feed my cat." Surrounded by flying beasts, Gilgamesh continued to advance without any issues. The response to Gilgamesh was absolute ferocity, to which he said, "Roxy, do you want to try your new magic staff and the affinity of your spells? I'm sure these creatures will make good targets. You can give it a try." Roxy didn't hesitate and stood up. Gilgamesh, who was controlling the Vimana, positioned it perfectly for her to have a clear shot and said, "Try shortening the incantations, your magical sensitivity should now allow you to cast spells without chanting the full incantation if you concentrate." Water ball. Roxy murmured while pointing her staff at one of the flying creatures. Boom. The initial impact was swift, significant, and highly destructive, even sending the other creatures flying backward from the shockwave. With an excited smile, Roxy used a more potent water spell, creating water spears. The magic focused its power, and without showing any mercy, each spear struck the flying creatures, killing them relatively easily. Not only did it not deplete her mana, but the spell was 10 times more powerful than she had intended. Roar! Smelling the fresh blood, a larger ant-like creature quickly emerged, heading toward Gilgamesh and the others. However, before it could get close, a powerful fireball detonated it. Faster and stronger! Roxy shouted as dozens of water attacks swept away the approaching creatures, eliminating them one by one with relative ease. Brilliant thunder! Boom! 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 The impacts were devastating, all manipulated perfectly by Roxy, who now seemed capable of anything as long as it involved magic. Some fireballs struck down monsters that only sought to kill them, while her earth spells manipulated the ground to deal with terrestrial enemies. However, no matter how destructive her attacks were, she still needed to learn and improve old spells now that she had the power to do so. Talent was needed, but a high mana density, not to mention sensitivity, was also crucial. Boom! As the last nearby enemy was eliminated, Roxy, breathing heavily, surveyed the destruction she had caused and felt a certain fear. Did she do all that by herself? In just a few days, her strength had increased so much that she could no longer be compared to ordinary people. However, as the smell of blood permeated the surroundings even faster, more creatures rushed to arrive, as if seeking an opportunity to enjoy something delicious. "Well done, Roxy. We should land and train as a group," Gilgamesh said as he descended on his Vimana, seeing that Eris also wanted to test her new strength. As they separated into 3 different locations but covering each other's backs, Gilgamesh drew 2 swords from the Gate of Babylon. With a sweeping motion of his sword, he unleashed a series of incredibly lethal attacks, clearing everything in front of them. "Let me show off this time." With those words, Gilgamesh wielded his swords, and the shadow of the blade slicing through the sky cut a massive creature that was heading their way in half. A sudden rain of blood bathed the 3 of them, fighting with smiles on their faces. Gilgamesh, Eris, and Roxy fought like mad, brandishing their swords and eliminating the aggressive beasts that came towards them. Not long after, there were piles of corpses, and the stench of blood filled the air, making Gilgamesh frown. As more groups of creatures headed their way, Gilgamesh opened over 50 golden ripples from which dozens of swords shot out like arrows, aimed at the incoming enemies. Boom! 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 Deafening explosions rocked the earth and raised dust clouds. Gilgamesh's attacks were truly brutal, mass-killing all formidable creatures that approached them like rabid hounds. Even though the beast's skin was incredibly tough, it was no match for Gilgamesh's powerful attacks. In a short period, their group had killed so many formidable creatures that they lost count. Roar! Finally, a monarch leading this area revealed its formidable body. It was like a giant, covered in a thick fur of beasts, and its body was entirely made of stone. "That one is bigger," Gilgamesh said, who looked fierce, as if she were a blood-stained war goddess. Roxy, on the other hand, had a divine look, with blue marks on her body due to blood mutation, appearing like a water goddess. Both formidable-looking women stood on either side of Gilgamesh, ready to attack at any moment. "I've got this." Gilgamesh stepped forward, and his hair fluttered as his power condensed around him. Though this was a genuine giant of stone, thousands of meters tall, it could only be destroyed under Gilgamesh's ferocious attacks. There was no mercy in his actions. Boom! With a powerful swift strike, the giant's head fell to the ground. Without stopping, Gilgamesh appeared in front of the stone giant and, using the threads of his swords, began to dismember the giant at an astonishing speed. Surprisingly, red blood flowed from the cracks in the giant, staining Gilgamesh's body, making him wonder what he was actually attacking. In his world, stone giants didn't bleed, but for some reason, this one did. These creatures are corrupted by a demonic beast. They are not usually this aggressive, let alone territorial. "It's likely that something is controlling them to attack us," Gilgamesh explained as he sent his wives back to his treasury and observed the fallen stone giant. Chapter 136, What Mysteries? Eris wiped the blood running down her cheek as she kept a vigilant eye out for any surprise attacks from other beasts. Roxy had a spell ready for emergencies, and throughout the battle, Eris had taken the front line, while Roxy handled ranged attacks, which were more destructive. "Our scent is disgusting," Eris muttered in disgust while wringing out her blood-soaked scarlet hair. "But you don't look bad all covered in blood," Gilgamesh thought to himself as he walked toward the giant's corpse. This giant had its lance held firmly in its hand, preparing to attack Gilgamesh. Unfortunately, it never got the chance as it was cut into several pieces. It had thought it could easily kill Gilgamesh, but the way it was crushed was rather embarrassing. In the war against the deities, Gilgamesh had witnessed how they summoned giants to prepare to wipe out entire races beneath the earth. However, in this world, he didn't know exactly what their objectives were or who had created them. Summoned spirits and golems created by magic were always the products of someone powerful, but in this world, perhaps only a god could create these majestic entities. Gilgamesh had never faced a true god, but he believed they were the only ones with the capability to create such wondrous beings. It was worth noting that this giant stood thousands of meters tall, weighed millions of tons, and appeared to have strict orders to defend this place. The beasts here seemed to age more quickly than others, so there must be something influencing their exponential growth. Surveying the thousands of corpses of these ferocious beasts on the battlefield, Gilgamesh couldn't help but shake his head with a sense of helplessness. With so many bodies, there was no doubt that valuable meat and resources would go to waste, which could have been used to create those characteristic armors of his Knights' Legion. Many new knights needed the blood of this place to ascend in power, and many other resources could be used to decorate and create high-quality products. Though his golden rule was that these things meant nothing, it was still a sin to leave all this behind. Gilgamesh's group had killed many enemy beasts on their way into the northern depths. As they ventured deeper, the beasts grew increasingly powerful. At first, Eris and Roxy could come out unscathed, but as they progressed, they were gradually wounded. "Keep on fighting, and when you can't anymore, I'll protect you myself." Even though he had said he would protect them from all harm, they were fighting side by side with enemy beasts. They had to push their limits to maximize their abilities and gain experience in their newfound power, so this form of guardianship was the best they could receive. "Hajaja, keep coming." Despite still looking out for them, Gilgamesh became increasingly fierce and bloodthirsty as he fought. Unintentionally, his body exuded more and more brutality and a bloodthirst that everyone could sense, including Eris, who had adopted the same behavior, using one deadly skill after another. Boom! 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 Gilgamesh's gaze made the beasts feel as if a supreme being were watching them, and they were naturally eliminated without offering any resistance. "Tempest!" Roxy shouted, casting a powerful spell that shook the earth, split the skies, and opened everything in its path with a fierce water avalanche. From the other side, Eris moved like a ghost, leaving residual silhouettes while killing uncontrollable beasts. She was excited and had entered a state of balance that very few could match. The brutal and ruthless battle was the best thing for both Eris and Roxy. The best kind of training is always infernal. Fighting in such a dangerous place was the best way for them to resonate with Gilgamesh and, in turn, learn more about their powers. As an additional layer of protection, Gilgamesh had unleashed his Enkidja chain, which moved intelligently across the battlefield, protecting Eris and Roxy, while Gilgamesh continued to have fun. Furthermore, fighting in this way was the only way for Gilgamesh to regain the feeling of having fought on that battlefield against the apostles, the will of the gods, and those divine creatures sent to kill him. He had felt slight echoes of that time just now. Everyone would die. Without restraint, Gilgamesh opened hundreds of ripples and ruthlessly attacked his seemingly endless enemies. At this moment, the brutality of the battlefield could make even the most experienced warriors tremble because no matter how aggressive they were, what was unfolding had no name. On the ground thousands of meters away, Gilgamesh felt a foreboding sense when suddenly the ground sunk, and a bluish root shot out at great speed. This time, he unleashed half of his power and with a single sword strike, tens of thousands of beasts that continued to advance toward his direction were forcibly crushed. These ancient things emerging from the confines of this place were truly terrifying, a fact that Gilgamesh had noticed, so he attacked with even greater force. "Eris, Roxy, both of you return to the Vimana." Gilgamesh's command was like a whisper, but they, who were immersed in battle, heard it. They quickly boarded the Vimana, and under Roxy's control, it soared high into the air. At that moment, Gilgamesh's golden-shaded shadow flickered, and his body reappeared high above the ground. When his shadow reappeared, he was no longer thousands of meters away but now stood on the ground. Who are you? Chapter 137, Mysterious Place. Gilgamesh's voice penetrated the depths of the darkness, displaying his authority as a monarch, causing the roots to suddenly cease their advance. An incredibly sinister aura was unleashed as a dark figure with chains crawled out from the distance. You are in my palace, there's no need for such a dominant tone in your questions. A whispered voice emanated from the darkness as Gilgamesh remained aloft, his expression unchanged. It's not that I require those kinds of answers from you, I'll get the answers I seek when I want them, Gilgamesh stated, locking eyes with the adversary. After a few seconds, he continued, the world is very small. I never thought that purely by coincidence, I'd encounter an error made by the god I'm searching for. This time, Gilgamesh drew one of his most destructive swords, the Sword of Desolation. This sword harnessed sheer brute force with gravity augmented according to the weight of the impacts. With a simple wave of the sword, it destroyed several kilometers around, annihilating everything in its path without hesitation. Gilgamesh appeared right in front of the figure, and with a single strike, it seemed as if the sky tortured the earth, shattering everything in its path. The dark figure with chains struggled to defend itself, to no avail. Taking control of the battle, Gilgamesh moved his Enkidja chains, which ensnared his target. Trapped in a prison that seemed to bind even gods, the figure desperately attempted to escape Gilgamesh's clutches. It's too late, wretched thing. If you wish to attain immortality, at least do a decent job and do not bring suffering to the world that is forced to witness your death, Gilgamesh declared. He pointed his left hand, which held a golden sword, and a powerful beam ravaged his enemy. Boom! With a single motion of his hand, Gilgamesh's armor gleamed impressively. The black figure, who had lived for thousands of years, began to scream unpleasantly as it struggled to resist the attack. For anyone who dared oppose Gilgamesh, only a painful death filled with brutality awaited them. No! The black spirit roared, desperately wishing to escape and never to have crossed paths with such a powerful being as Gilgamesh. But it had no chance. As a human who had once achieved enviable heights in magic, life had pushed it to commit inhumane acts to extend its existence by hundreds of years, but this had taken away its humanity. Under the attack and judgment of Gilgamesh, how could a mere human who sought to emulate the gods through dark means withstand the onslaught? With a muffled explosion, the black spirit's body slowly disappeared. Under Gilgamesh's attack, his enemy turned into nothing more than dust. The sword Gilgamesh had used was incredibly powerful, capable of even piercing the heart of a powerful god with formidable defensive techniques. Regardless of any magical shield or defensive object, this sword would always target the heart of the enemy, seeking a swift death. Gilgamesh's swords were obtained from messengers of the gods who had come to take his life. This is one of the reasons he possessed such formidable swords and enviable magical items. All the treasures of his slain enemies and allies ended up in his Gate of Babylon, including the giant's lance that he had eliminated moments ago. I would have never thought that people from other worlds could be summoned. Believing that it's logical makes me think that somehow there are methods to travel between worlds. But even to consider that means one must have greater authority than a god, something I don't wish to possess right now. Gilgamesh looked at Eris and Roxy approaching in their Vimana and said, it seems that everything is over. This creature was about to do something truly horrific. Eris, who was looking at Gilgamesh without the upper part of her armor, asked, what kind of aberration was that? A corrupted spirit. They are the humans who summon themselves as spirits and somehow manage to live longer than their race allows, Roxy said, wiping the blood from her face. I read something related to this in the School of Magic. Some people even summon beings from other worlds to take over their bodies. That's exactly what this thing was attempting, Gilgamesh smiled and pointed, its signature for living longer involved a sacrificial ritual. It killed hundreds of people and used that to extend its life. Certainly disgusting, but it's what kept it alive until now. Let's clean up, then we'll investigate what's left of this place. Gilgamesh surveyed the surroundings before heading to a deep water well. Covered in blood, their scent was far from pleasant. Although they had unlocked their hidden abilities, Roxy and Eris had been inexperienced at first but ultimately became formidable. When they reached a seemingly calm place, they all entered the water. Feeling its chilling temperature, Gilgamesh found it helpful in clearing his mind. He believed that the battle from a moment ago had been too intense, but he could see in the eyes of Eris and Roxy a brutality that would mold their personalities, enabling them to protect themselves. Roxy's staff wasn't just for magic, it also had a sword hovering on its side, serving as a secondary weapon for her, given that her physical strength was now well above average. She had become faster, stronger, and her magic was incredibly powerful. As for Eris, her flexible and lightweight full body armor, with the exception of her right hand and some exposed areas, was the perfect protection for her. It was only through combat that they would truly understand the brutality of war, something that could only be learned by fighting and was incredibly precious. Chapter 138, The Ruins. The essence of nature in this place was exceedingly dense. In a short period of time, the fatigue of Gilgamesh's group and all the expended energy was rapidly recovering. After they left, Gilgamesh decided to continue moving forward while he listened to the excited Eris, who claimed to be possibly the most powerful woman when it came to swordplay. If we put aside experience, her words might be true, and if not, she wouldn't be an easy rival for anyone to face. At that moment, Gilgamesh told them about the mutations in Roxy's body and explained that the blood ritual was something he only performed on humans. Roxy, belonging to a different race, had a special bloodline, which extended her life and gave her certain characteristics, like the ability to communicate telepathically with others. Now that he mentioned it, she should be capable of recovering her telepathic abilities, so if she tried, it was possible that she could do so. Regarding the bluish lines on her body, they were simply an effect on her body when she used her maximum combat abilities. To reinforce his point, Gilgamesh showed them his reddish lines on his body and told them that those appeared when he used his full strength, indicating he was going all out in a fight. Otherwise, he would be facing an enemy who couldn't withstand half of his power. After sharing this information with the girls, he started giving Eris advice on her performance in large-scale battles, suggesting that she should flow more on the battlefield, trusting her unique combat instincts. Everyone has a unique combat style, many confuse it with instinct, but it's much greater than that. With a battle instinct, it will tell you when the enemy is about to attack you long before they do, and you will know where to move and how to strike at just the right moment, Gilgamesh said while looking at Eris, who kept a serious expression. There were many levels of battle instinct, and Gilgamesh had reached all of them due to his special eyes. However, Eris, with her keen gaze, had the potential to achieve incredible levels if she paid more attention to the smallest details and relied more on her instincts. After his conversation with Eris, Gilgamesh turned to Roxy and said, "Roxy, you must find a balance between magic and melee combat. You have great potential if you manage to find a balance between these two techniques. Of course, I'm not asking you to become an expert in swordplay, but rather to use that additional capability to become unpredictable. Eris can help me sharpen my battle senses. I have incredible physical abilities, but I think I lack the basic knowledge of swordsmanship." Roxy nodded, determined to develop this new fighting style that could be unique in the world. She would be special, so she said, "Although I may not achieve much, I will do my best." Eris held her hands and said, "What are you talking about? The strength in your sword movements was far from normal. I'm sure you can surpass the average knights." Boom! At that moment, Gilgamesh's Vimana was attacked by swift flying beasts that got dangerously close. This time, he decided not to engage in close combat and manipulated his Vimana to unleash multiple swords from his golden ripples right in front of them. As the directed attacks reached their enemies, the swords caused devastating damage, bringing down the aggressive beasts. Gilgamesh, who had cleaned the blood off his body, didn't want to stain himself further with these mindless creatures, so he attacked from his seat on the throne next to the two beautiful women. The manipulation of the Vimana was far from ordinary, its combat performance was something to envy, and Gilgamesh was confident that he could defeat most of his rivals in this world if he chose to do so. It wasn't arrogance, it was just a simple truth. Gilgamesh soared through a mountain after the pursuit intensified, but the sensation of going at such high speeds made Eris and the pale Roxy release a mix of surprised and anxious screams. Boom! Several impacts caused the entire mountain to be destroyed, inflicting great damage in the area and killing numerous aggressive beasts that were trying to escape. This time, Gilgamesh was being followed by a monkey-like beast that looked so joyful that, in jest, he told Eris that if she didn't stop screaming, he would let the monkey give her a kiss. "Gil, you'll make me sneak a pig to kiss you in your sleep." Eris shouted while reaching out to pinch Gilgamesh's ribs, but the absurd increase in speed made her grip tighten. "Wouldn't it be better if you slowed down a bit?" Clutching her hat, Roxy tightened her grip on Gilgamesh's shirt as she shouted. At this moment, Gilgamesh released his anger on the foolish monkey that was following him, and he shot multiple swords at it, causing the creature to explode into 1,000 pieces. Clearly, the paradise in this hidden place beneath the deep sea was obscured by very dark shadows because of the incredibly aggressive beasts. Where are all these beasts coming from? Gilgamesh's scream seemed to pierce the earth, expressing his frustration over an unjust situation. They were the invaders, so it was normal for them to be attacked, but this was something they would not accept under any circumstances. For creatures like these, they acted based on territories, and the entire hidden area under the sea was a well-managed region by the beasts because their territories were quite clear. Before Gilgamesh arrived, they had avoided contact, but now that many invaders had come, it led to the destruction of several territories and chaos due to the struggle for control of this place. Boom! At that moment, Gilgamesh began a large-scale extermination, as the beasts wouldn't leave him alone. He used his precious swords, which, after fulfilling their duty, returned to his treasury. With a jolt, Gilgamesh's Vimana collided with a fierce beast that was torn apart completely, and thanks to the sturdy construction of the Vimana, nothing was damaged. Blood and beast parts were sent flying in all directions, so this time, Gilgamesh took advantage of the confusion to disappear from the area, moving to a much quieter zone. "Are we alone?" Gilgamesh asked, while looking at the clear tears in his shirt. Eris got up from the throne as if nothing had happened and said, "It seems we are in the clear." Chapter 139, In the Depths. Thousands of years after the collapse of the known worlds, some of the strongest survivors divided the human world into large continents formed after the devastation that left other races without worlds to live in. Others created hidden places to avoid any connection with other creatures. Of course, these places wouldn't be made public and would always remain hidden because many of the unshown races feared what others might do if they started to live in proximity. One of the hidden zones was deep within a blue forest, covered in enormous nearly indestructible trees that protected the population of moon elves, whose hair was silver, and whose beauty was extraordinary. Although these elves had never had direct contact with other races, they maintained a close relationship with other elves who received their help whenever they were in danger. These moon elves shared the secret of the hidden zones with a demonic clan, the celestial race living in the clouds, and finally, the sacred prophets who resided in towers traversing the sky. The area they entered was a new one, created by pure humans who had lived here for an indeterminate amount of time, as it was impossible to determine for how long. Their deaths were a mystery, but upon Gilgamesh's inspection, he discovered a few things. This area was suitable for training, surviving, and facing nearly impossible challenges in the outside world. If humans lived here, it meant they were preparing for something specific that was unknown. Furthermore, the dangers were not fatal in this place, as there were special areas where the intensity of the beast's offensive was lower, such as the Divine Tree. Within a radius of 15,000 miles lay the actual training area. Only the most powerful would dare to enter, those confident in their own abilities. Thus, for powerful organizations, this place would be perfect for training their armies. It seemed that warriors below the Sword Saint rank or mages capable of casting king-ranked magic at least could survive in this place, but anything below that would be highly unlikely. This area served as a sacred battleground since the challenges one could find here were extremely challenging, preparing warriors to face specific enemies, those enemies that are similar to mindless beasts and ruthless killers, such as demons. So, 15,000 miles from the 30,000-mile safe area was the battlefield. Only armies of 20,000 men would dare to enter that place because of how intensive it could become. How dangerous it would be depended on luck. If one had bad luck, they would encounter tens of thousands of beasts. If they had good luck, it would only be a few hundred beasts. Naturally, these areas were subject to valuable rewards, along with extremely rare medicinal plants. The corpses of the beasts were also of great value. After the last race of humans living here was exterminated by a particular enemy, no one who had ever found this place would dare to enter, and for those who did, they never returned. Among the adventurers who entered alongside Gilgamesh's group, there were some who considered this place a no-man's land. There was a possibility of encountering millions of beasts in this area. From the perspective of any expert warrior, entering this place meant seeking death. Even sword saints bled easily in this place, and entire armies were consumed in clashes with the beasts. As for how large this land was, very few were sure, if any. Even Gilgamesh had explored only a tenth of what this place hides. There were some who even claimed that this place harbored an extremely dangerous beast. Others said that it was a battlefield lost by the human race, so if you ventured beyond what your eyes could see, you would die. Another rumor among adventurers indicated that this place had a malevolent demon lurking within, a demonic being superior to any demon the world had ever faced. No matter what, none of those who arrived dared to venture deeper into the forest, let alone into the deeper area where the real trials lay. The groups of adventurers immediately took measures, and no one wanted to retreat, so they set up their camps in strategic locations where they could defend against the attacks of any beasts. In a short period, these groups of adventurers had established themselves in this desolate area, making it more lively. Mercenary groups that knew they were beneath the powerful adventurer groups stayed in quieter areas and worked within a smaller radius, seeking medicinal plants. The stronger adventurer groups entered the forest where the harvesting area was, according to their own ambitions. All of these adventurer groups had elite squads that ventured kilometers into the forest without much trouble. They began battling the beasts as soon as they entered the forest, eliminating most of them with relative ease. Regarding the challenge zone, only Gilgamesh's group was present in the area, or so they thought, until a new opening appeared at the far end of the zone, from which several moon elves emerged. It appears that the assumptions of the ancient elves were correct. The pure humans have lost the battle against the enemy. I find it astonishing that, being considered the sole guardians of the ancient tree, they perished in battle. In this hidden area, a large group of moon elves gazed at the place with cold expressions, all of them feeling especially sorrowful. How difficult was it to keep the gate sealed? Asked a young elf who appeared to be a few hundred years old, as he looked at the condition of the area. At the very least, they did seal the gate. We couldn't have kept it sealed even with the help of the affiliated races that serve our purpose. Despite their death, they've shown that their existence goes beyond merely being alive. Worthy forebears of humans. So it is our task to find the gate and return to the Blue Forest before the time of the first opening. An elderly elf, his body enveloped in a powerful aura and clad in silver armor, mounted his powerful reindeer and began to advance through the green forest. It seems we weren't the only ones to find the entrance. Non-ordinary humans have entered this place. A silver-haired elven woman with blindfolded eyes murmured these words, but everyone could hear her perfectly. I'm not so sure about that. They can do as they please in this place because to enter the central area, they need to be much stronger. Then let's go. Chapter 140, The Door or Wall. Millennia ago, in an ancient forest, a magical tree of astonishing proportions was born. This tree was unlike any other, for it possessed the power to connect worlds and dimensions. The Moon Elves, a mysterious and wise race, discovered the existence of this tree and prophesied that only 2 humans, 1 man and 1 woman, would be able to control the gateway to the worlds housed within this tree. The Moon Elves, Varian and Selene, constantly watched over the tree and patiently awaited the chosen humans to appear. Over time, a human couple, Ethan and Amelia, stumbled upon the tree while exploring a different world from their own. The magic of the tree selected them as the guardians of the world's door. Varian and Selene appeared before them and revealed their destiny, which seemed like something out of a fairy tale. Over the years, both humans and moon elves lived in harmony and learned to harness the tree's power. The populations of both groups grew, and together, they built a prosperous society around the tree. However, peace would not last forever. One day, a cataclysm shook the world of the moon elves. Dragons, divine creatures, and demonic beings ravaged their land, causing devastation that nearly wiped out the Moon Elves. As the Moon Elves were on the verge of launching a direct war against the invaders, their world also began to crumble without explanation. At that moment, the entire Moon Elf race utilized the most potent of ancient magics and sent the ancient tree to the human world from which the first human descendants originated. On that day, millions of Moon Elves, thousands of humans, and divine creatures perished under the collapse of their beloved and precious world. To survive, Varian and Selene chose to hide alongside the surviving humans, keeping the existence of the world's door a secret. By the time the races from all the connected worlds arrived in the human world, Varian and Selene created 2 separate spaces. One perished where the ancient tree had fallen, offering all the remaining magic in their bodies to create a space even the new and old gods could not enter. The other place was where the Moon Elves would regain their magic. Selene chose to die in the Moon Forest, where the nutrients of her body and the ancient magic within gave birth to the silver trees. To prevent both races from being exterminated in one place, the humans separated from the Moon Elves and became the first protectors of the door. Meanwhile, the Moon Elves sought a way to expand their power and accompany the humans to the door. However, why was this door important? After the creation of all the known worlds by that declining god, this tree was born alongside them and offered those who had the opportunity to connect with it godlike power, the ability to travel between dimensions, and even the ease to enter other worlds. But its utility diminished significantly with the destruction of the worlds connected to the ancient tree. When the elves were about to abandon the idea of protecting it, this tree connected to a unique special world, one larger and darker than the night itself. Now the door was connected to a portal leading to the dark world, a place 10 times larger than the known world, inhabited by creatures of darkness that fed on the light of other worlds. The moon elves and humans had fought a long and ruthless war against these creatures when the door first opened. The first war was won, but 100 years later, a sudden opening occurred, and this time the humans were on their own. Communication with the Blue Forest was delayed, and due to the outbreak of corrupted energy, the space was sealed, preventing the moon elves from coming to the aid of the humans. This war was inevitable, so even children wielded swords and launched a fierce counter-offensive that sent the dark beasts back to their world. Hundreds of thousands of humans ventured into the dark world to reinforce the door, allowing the moon elves, who had the longest lifespan, to complete the task. What happened next? The door was sealed from the inside, giving the moon elves time to prepare for the war that was about to break out when the door reopened. During the 100 years after the first opening, contact was established with a demon clan, the last surviving clan of the celestial race, and a clan hidden in the Central Sea. Therefore, when humans launched that fierce counter-offensive, they expected that by then the entire world would unite to fight the dark beings and defeat them completely. If the world does not unite, no one will survive. This place is extremely dangerous. We're just an exploration group, but if we're not careful, we might not make it back, said an elderly elf to all those following him. Yes, elder. A group of 200 mercenaries died while facing a ferocious beast. As humans were killing the beasts in this place, they all considered it was time to enjoy the humans as well and have a great meal. Many powerful beings moved through this place to kill the invaders, something even the best and most experienced adventurers did not know. The Black Bull adventurer group has been completely annihilated in the southern part of the forest. Their weapons were the only things left, according to reports from the information line. However, the dangers of this mysterious place were not limited to just the beasts. There were hazardous places that could kill anyone if they were not careful. After the first day of rest, this space separated from the real world turned into a zone of blood and battle. Whether adventurers or beasts, both sides began killing each other with similar goals. The stench and the blood permeated every corner of this land. Despite many successful raids and rich rewards, horrifying stories began to spread. However, the most powerful adventurer groups emerged victorious from all their battles within this place. Nothing could stop them as they moved in the outer areas of the forest. Their rich rewards encouraged fearful adventurers to dare to undertake highly dangerous raids to obtain valuable resources. The Sword King Brutus killed a huge bear. In a single afternoon, there was huge news after seeing the real size of the bear that Brutus's group had eliminated. Do you know that 40% of the people who came to this place have died? That's more than 900 people. The survival rate here is much lower than on a real battlefield. If you're scared, you can leave. Rewards are not for cowards now. We, as adventurers, are willing to die, and we keep that in mind when exploring places completely unknown to the world. At least we will go down in history when we send the news back. Chapter 141, The Ruins. After escaping the hellish battlefield, Gilgamesh breathed in clean, blood-free air for a while. He had discovered that this place was infested with beasts, and finding a safe resting spot was a challenge in itself. Unfortunately for anyone who crossed paths with Gilgamesh, not even their bodies would remain intact as he continued to explore the mysterious, ever-revealing expanse. Following that, Gilgamesh aimed to avoid unnecessary fights, not wanting to be stained with blood once again. This was one of the reasons he contemplated tearing this place apart into 1,000 pieces. The beasts here were possibly influenced to fight relentlessly, even if it meant dying on the battlefield. However, based on the suggestions of both Eris and Roxy, they told Gilgamesh that it would be an excellent idea to use this battlefield for training his knights. Roar! A pitiful cry rang out after an animal hidden within a water pond met its end with a single blow. Suddenly, chains descended into the water, pulling out the beast, mutilated by one of Gilgamesh's swords. Enkidu's chains, one of his most powerful weapons with consciousness and the ability to move at will to neutralize enemies, were among his most prized possessions, followed by Ea. Not only was it incredibly powerful, capable of sealing gods, but its ultimate attack could destroy more than a continent if used at full power. Water spirits, cursed nuisances. Gilgamesh, who was merely trying to cool off in the water, was attacked by a water spirit that had been hiding like a toad in this place. Their appearance is quite repulsive. Is it edible? Eris poked the corpse, which looked like a slimy substance, and asked Roxy, who was standing nearby. I've never seen anything like this, not even in the demon continent. This is a new discovery, so I can't answer that. Roxy crouched next to Eris, examining the substance from the water spirit's corpse. They remain troublesome. How could they even think of attacking me? Gilgamesh fixed his gaze on the water pond, as if trying to determine if there were more of these annoying creatures. To deal with this water spirit, Gilgamesh was initially about to be dragged in, but his chains immediately neutralized the threat. However, before the creature's demise, it managed to splash Gilgamesh with water. After calming his anger, Gilgamesh surveyed the area and discovered that there had been a civilization living here before his arrival. What was unsettling was that there was no one left alive, no signs of life, and all that remained of this place was desolation. A very curious beast approached. Gilgamesh muttered as he realized that a stronger presence was now approaching in his direction. Eris turned her head as if trying to see something and said, "What are we going to do about that? It would be best to move away. We might not have the capabilities to engage in a battle of this magnitude right now, not until we improve together, Eris." Roxy's words were more prudent, and Eris simply nodded, returning to the Vimana that was beside them. "Step back a bit, I will investigate this commotion," Gilgamesh said when he saw Eris and Roxy leaving the area. He vanished from his position as a powerful attack approached. As Gilgamesh moved westward, Eris and Roxy followed him, avoiding any unnecessary risks. The beast that continued to observe Gilgamesh was deeply intrigued, something Gilgamesh welcomed. Many would have tried to flee this perilous situation, but someone like Gilgamesh was not accustomed to that, no matter how hard he tried. There are things in his life that simply cannot be changed, and that's how it will remain. The approaching beast was of a terrifying age. It had initially followed Gilgamesh's group and watched from a distance as those three tiny individuals dared to enter this desolate battlefield. Whether they were merely weak humans was not a consideration, as it sensed a terrifying aura coming from Gilgamesh. When it attempted to launch an attack, it suddenly saw two of the tiny figures following the one that had given it a terrifying feeling move away. This didn't matter, as Gilgamesh remained in the same spot. But after a few seconds, he began to move in a peculiar manner. After a while, seeing that Gilgamesh had no intention of attacking, the beast took the initiative to do so instead. Boom! The ancient beasts in this place were akin to dragons, with their powerful bodies and gigantic sizes capable of crushing any creature living on the outside. A single strike from these creatures could kill a sword king without any issue, not to mention a sword god who might not survive such a battle. However, Gilgamesh vanished as the blow impacted, completely obliterating a mountain that shattered into pieces. Nobody, not even the beast that had attacked him, knew how he had escaped so abruptly, but he evaded that attack with great ease. Boom! From the sky, a fierce bloody light appeared, and a lance pierced down directly through space, causing a powerful shockwave that made the earth tremble and the sky shake in just a few seconds. This lance, capable of rupturing space, let alone this immensely powerful beast, could even kill an ancient dragon under its mighty assault, not to mention the gods of the time who would shudder at this attack. The beast that had attacked Gilgamesh roared. This powerful lance pierced the top of its head. Under the assault of the bloody lance, as mighty as it was, death was the only outcome. However, at the moment it was about to die, it saw Gilgamesh suspended in the air, looking at it with a disdainful expression, waiting for an outcome that, in its eyes, would never change. "Are you trying to attack me here? You should know that this is my territory. I now declare this area a special sanctuary, cared for and protected by me." Gilgamesh scoffed arrogantly and said, "In a battle I participate in, you, as a beast, would be nothing more than a damn creature responsible for carrying supplies. You are utterly useless in combat, so you should have lived like a sheep herded by my shepherds." When Gilgamesh mentioned these shepherds, he referred to those sword gods and mages capable of casting god-level magic who were under his command, something that no one would expect, not even the human god himself. It should be known that sword gods were hard to come by, with no more than possibly 5 in this world. However, when Gilgamesh began building his army, the number soared into the hundreds, not counting the mages whose production had skyrocketed after the mage towers and the fortress in the sky were established. This classification of supposedly the most powerful individuals in the world was outdated in Gilgamesh's eyes, so he simply considered them as small stones he should step on to assert his authority in this world and lead as the king of heroes, emperor of humanity that he is, and guide humans on the right path they had long lost. After brutally killing this beast, there was nothing left behind for Gilgamesh. Even its body had been completely erased from existence without realizing how it had died at the hands of a human. In this place, there are human ruins. It seems to be a much more interesting place than I'm imagining. Gilgamesh murmured after appearing in the Vimana and sitting on the throne alongside his two women. Chapter 142, A Broken Star. Our paths have led us to a highly peculiar place, Roxy. Do you know anything about this? Gilgamesh's question brought Roxy out of her thoughts. She directed her gaze at the structures buried in the tree roots and moss. These were clearly human-made structures, but she couldn't provide a vague answer. These are remnants of a civilization, and judging by the architecture, they should be human. Only they had worked with this style of architecture, and due to the time that has passed since it was left completely alone, something very wrong must have happened for it to be left in a state of decay. Eris observed Gilgamesh's expression, which seemed more serious than usual, even though he tried to hide it. She patted his back with a reassuring look, letting him know that she was there for him. She couldn't fully understand why he was so concerned, but she did know that she would be his strongest support. Gilgamesh's gaze extended beyond the destroyed castles and fields buried among the bushes. Further ahead, there was a flat terrain where swords were still visible thrust into the ground, pieces of high-quality armor, and in front of those clear traces of battle were enormous whale-like bodies, other creatures with tentacled structures, all in a state of decomposition. Stay alert, we've arrived in a very dangerous place. Gilgamesh's expression turned serious when he saw this battlefield. So when he advanced to that location, he slowly flew, manipulating his Vimana to capture all the details of this place. Eris was surprised. She didn't expect Gilgamesh to say these words after having fought together on a battlefield and faced powerful creatures that even sword kings couldn't handle. She was puzzled by why he mentioned it now. But if someone like him says it, it means that the direction they were heading was much more dangerous than she thought. Immediately upon getting closer, Gilgamesh saw these creatures, and after observing them for a while, he couldn't see anything truly odd. What he could sense, though, was darkness in the corpses of these creatures, which piqued his curiosity. What exactly happened in this place? I'll have to look into the past to find out what happened here. Gilgamesh began to use his ability and started to rewind the years. While the ruins were reversing, just after more than 100 years had passed, he saw something truly remarkable. A war had taken place here. What had occurred was a brutal war that exterminated the human inhabitants of this domain. They had referred to these creatures on the surface as night beasts, ancient beings that sought this world for their own benefit and with the intention of stealing its light. When Gilgamesh saw that massive portal, his head turned between the battlefield and then he spotted the huge structure where the opened gateway was, an arch made of wood crafted from the roots of an ancient tree. He wasn't mistaken, they were just a few meters away from that so-called portal connecting this dimension to another world. After that, Gilgamesh's group swiftly moved to the south, where they encountered many more night beasts. Gilgamesh's Vimana suddenly stopped in front of the door, where there were intense traces of dark energy, something stifling that Roxy noticed due to her sensitivity to magic, and Eris sensed due to her heightened senses. Looking around, apart from this ancient wooden arch formed from the roots of the ancient tree, the entire terrain was unusually flat, with thousands of these night beasts. At least 200 years ago, these creatures brought devastation to this place, which should have originally been the site where the ancient tree was protected, still connected to dimensions that had long been abandoned by all races. Eris observed this battlefield and said, compared to the stories of the human-demon war, this place is several times more significant. These humans weren't fighting for a piece of land but for the authority to control the world. It doesn't make sense. How did others not realize that a war was happening here? While all the races fought for trivial objectives, people here died to stop these creatures. Roxy felt a shiver run down her spine when she saw this place. She wasn't prepared to witness this brutal battlefield where possibly thousands of warriors had died without recognition for their feats. In this place, there was a portal. The humans here were tasked with protecting the seal and managed to expel the creatures you see on the ground from this dimension. I fear that where these creatures come from is not a friendly place. They are all here to eliminate humans, but they were stopped before they could do so. Just at that moment, in the distance, several elven soldiers moved with the help of their mounts, enormous reindeer, and their speed was extremely fast. However, they all stopped when they saw Gilgamesh and decided to proceed slowly due to the unfamiliar situation they were in. At that moment, Gilgamesh looked at these silver-haired elves and descended from his Vimana, taking a few steps forward while locking eyes with the eldest elf who was at the forefront. My old eyes, which have seen everything a god has experienced, are surprised to see two humans and a meagred woman. May I know what you seek in this place? The old elf posed this question as if it were natural for them to answer, but when his eyes fixed on Gilgamesh, he was taken aback by what lay behind that gaze. Gilgamesh looked at these elves and said, "For an elder at the doorstep of the grave, you never learned to speak properly. I can tell that after all, elves remain nothing but simple beings with very long lives to level all their flaws. Insolent! How dare you speak to the old Serdan in such a manner? I'll cut your mouth." However, at that moment, the elf who had been addressing Gilgamesh in a highly oppressive tone was sent flying at a terrifying speed, impaled by a sword that had emerged from a golden ripple. "Sarian!" A female elf cried out and immediately ran to where her comrade had fallen. "It seems I'm right. You should be superior in wisdom compared to humans, but it appears that we are not understanding each other correctly, isn't that so?" Gilgamesh asked as he looked at the elder elf who stood before him. Chapter 143, The Moon Elves. Extremely brutal, arrogant, and bloodthirsty. These were the first words that appeared in the mind of the elderly elf named Serdan, who raised his hand to stop the other elves who were about to take action to kill Gilgamesh. "I apologize for my misbehavior, it's been a long time since I've had a conversation with someone who isn't my disciple." Serdan dismounted and walked toward Gilgamesh. After getting close enough to have a pleasant conversation, he said, "My name is Serdan. I am an ancient elder of the Moon Elf clan in the Silver Forest. I am here to take the portal to the Blue Forest for its future protection." Roxy immediately informed Gilgamesh, "I've heard that the Moon Elves have disappeared for hundreds of years. Many claim to have seen them, but not everyone is sure about these reports and view them more as legends." Upon hearing that, Gilgamesh nodded in acknowledgement of the information while pondering the reason. Still, he decided that it was irrelevant to him and said, "If you take this portal, you will cause the destruction of an entire continent before the most powerful beings in this world act to contain the threat. For some reason, this portal to the dark world has been maintained, and it will continue to be that way. How do you know about that?" Serdan lost his composure upon hearing these claims that shouldn't be known beyond his elf clan and the last humans in this place. "Don't tell me." Gilgamesh shook his head upon understanding what Serdan was referring to, walked toward the portal, and said, "There aren't many things in that world that can challenge me, so I will rule this place while repopulating this area with a portion of my army. That should keep the hearts of the Moon Elves at ease, isn't that enough?" Serdan shook his head and said stubbornly, "I'm afraid that won't be possible. A rule has been established that only the Moon Elves would protect this place alongside the humans who received the blessing of the ancient tree. I still don't understand your insistence, but you should leave this task to us. Then why don't you live here and pledge your loyalty to the Azura Kingdom, which will be ruled by my fiancé in the future?" Eris looked coldly at the old man who seemed to know who was before him. "My name is Gilgamesh. I can see that your race's righteousness in keeping the door sealed is so great that I fully respect your sacrifices over the years. That being said, your reward will be that from now on, I will take it upon myself to completely destroy all dark existence on the other side when this door is opened. What do you say about that?" Gilgamesh's words this time didn't need to be contradictory, so when he looked beyond the lives of these people, his eyes settled on a very beautiful woman. But beyond that, it was her relationship with someone very important to him. So upon noticing this, he approached. "May I know your name?" The elven woman tightened her grip on her sword and said in a cold tone, "My name is Sarah. Do you have something to say?" Gilgamesh pretended not to remember and said, "You bear a certain resemblance to Elaine. Do you still remember your sister?" "What did you say?" Sarah yelled, suddenly losing her composure. She immediately drew a dagger from her belt and attempted to stab Gilgamesh, but his armor was so strong that the dagger's blade was completely shattered. "Sarah, stop right now!" Serdan roared, furious about the attack that could lead to a battle between the two sides. "You damn bitch, I'm going to cut your throat!" Eris immediately vanished from her position and, in an instant, struck Sarah's stomach, sending her flying dozens of meters before she could stop herself. Eris, with her crimson hair fluttering, was about to draw her sword when Gilgamesh's hand held her waist, and he said, "Calm down, my little fiancé. Her anger seems to be justified, although I don't quite understand it. Isn't Elaine your sister? You should love her, unless..." Eris seemed to understand something, so she stopped, furrowing her brow while glaring at these arrogant elves, and said, "If she doesn't give us a satisfactory answer, I'll personally kill her." Gilgamesh nodded and said, "If that's the case, I won't stop you. Do you think we'll stand idly by?" The Moon Elves, defying all authority from Serdan, unsheathed their swords, causing Roxy to grip her sword with her right hand and aim her shining staff of magic at the Moon Elves. Gilgamesh was anything but nervous. His women were terribly temperamental, and right now, they were ready to kill if things didn't calm down. Seeing this, he felt inexplicably pleased. But knowing that it was unnecessary for these elves to die, he said, "Tell us, Sarah. What's going on?" Sarah spat blood as she held her ribs, which had been crushed by a kick from a teenager no older than 18. She said, "My sister died years ago. The moonflower that represented her life faded long ago, so you don't have the right to name her so easily in my presence." Years ago, would that be it? Gilgamesh recalled that years ago, he released the seal on Elaine's body, and this might have triggered this special effect. Normally, curses are lifted when the one who bears them dies. You're mistaken. Elaine is fine, and we might end up engaged in the future. She would be my last wife if she wishes, of course. Years ago, I removed a curse from her body that had kept her sealed for 100 years. Can you imagine that? Gilgamesh asked Sarah, who, after realizing he wasn't lying, started to cry slightly. She told me that she had left her clan to travel the world, that was her dream. But for unknown reasons, she ended up in a temple where she stayed for over 100 years. I suppose she didn't want to return because she wanted to suffer in silence. Sarah was the only one who knew the reason why Elaine had left her clan, so after hearing the story from the man in front of her, she began to cry uncontrollably, and all she could say was, "Thank you for saving her, and forgive me for attacking you." Serdan, who was breaking out in a cold sweat, said, "What are you doing? Sheath your swords. Have you forgotten who Prince Gilgamesh is? Many elf tribes consider him a noble human, someone who has already liberated thousands of elves from the hands of slavers and returned them to the forests without asking for anything in return." When everyone who had been furious about Gilgamesh's attack on one of their own lowered their weapons, feeling regret for taking a hostile stance. "Well, I guess we were too aggressive as well." Gilgamesh walked over to the elf who was in agony. "I'm sorry. I must say I never thought you were Gilgamesh. The rumors say you're just a child, but now you look like an adult," said the elf who was receiving healing from a young elven mage. Gilgamesh smiled and said, "I suppose I'm very famous. Seeing the sincerity in your eyes, I'll heal you." This decision was not impulsive, he knew very well where the elves' hatred toward humans was directed, and it was due to slavery, kidnapping, and the destruction that many humans caused in elven tribes. For them, humans were all the same, and Gilgamesh was fine with accepting that, so he wasn't too harsh. The world needs a serious change to move forward because if slavery continues in this world divided by races, what will happen later is a war. Perhaps in his world, slavery was necessary, but here, it's an evil that's unnecessary because this world is composed of races, species, and customs. Humans are not the only ones living here, so whether it's eradicating all races and leaving only humans, nothing will be achieved other than abolishing slavery to make further progress in the future. Chapter 144, An Agreement? Gilgamesh retrieved a healing potion from his gate of Babylon for the elf who was on the brink of death. After a drop of the potion touched the moon elf's body, his deathly pale face quickly regained a rosy hue, and in just a few seconds, he made a full recovery. "What kind of potion is that?" "One made by a goddess." Gilgamesh didn't lie when he returned to Eris, who had a cold expression, and murmured, "I'm not going to apologize." "Why should you?" Gilgamesh asked while caressing her crimson hair, to which she smiled faintly. Serdan took a step forward, his face full of embarrassment, and said, "I must apologize for the shameful act we committed. We have been overly sensitive about the gate issue, but that doesn't justify our lack of respect, so I beg your forgiveness." "You can forget about that. Since you are from the same clan as Elaine, we can put the past behind us. So tell me, once you take the portal, what ensures that another one won't be born from the ancient tree?" Gilgamesh pointed to the gigantic tree and said, "You know very well that the ancient tree has the ability to travel between worlds and dimensions, so its power was somehow taken from the dark world to create the portal, which is constantly being opened by creatures of darkness." Serdan showed a worried expression, and after thinking about what Gilgamesh said, he replied, "We don't have much time. Perhaps the portal will open again in a few years, and we, the Moon Elves, need to protect it. This is our sin for bringing the ancient tree to this world. Maybe this is why we have to bear this sacrifice continuously." Now that he mentions it, it makes more sense. There is no doubt that if the Moon Elves and those humans chosen by the ancient tree brought that same tree to the human world when their world was destroyed, they should take responsibility for this anomaly that shouldn't actually be happening. If you look at it from that perspective, the Moon Elves are guilty of this crime. However, small matters like these do not concern Gilgamesh because maybe, if he investigates the ancient tree, he can enter a completely different dimension and discover new places. This is an object he truly doesn't have in his treasury, so if you ask him, he wants to take the tree for himself and explore its abilities. Of course, he shouldn't reveal his intentions because that might not be beneficial if he wants to have Elaine's tribe as people under his command. I can easily destroy the creatures of darkness, you shouldn't worry. Besides, I won't allow you to take this portal and harm the world out of your selfishness. There are humans I must take care of, they may be currently on the wrong path, but I will change that course. When Gilgamesh said this, it awakened a series of deep thoughts within Ctto. He had lived for over 500 years and was one of the first beings born in this world. Consequently, he had inevitably learned about slavery, wars, and divisions. Everyone fought for complete dominance of this piece of land, without considering that all races except for humans were merely guests in this place. In other words, this world did not belong to them, but humans had never acknowledged this in their lives. Upon discovering that hundreds of elves were being returned to the forests and tribes, he also learned that they were being protected by the Tower of Uruk, an organization that had risen to prominence on most continents, and its strength couldn't be challenged. The Tower of Uruk never engaged in conflicts with the slavers, as many expected. Instead, they bought all the slaves sold in the market. Afterward, they conducted investigations and returned those who wanted to go back home. Ctto had great respect for Prince Gilgamesh of the Asura Kingdom. Perhaps, if he were to become a king, slavery might be completely abolished in the Asura Kingdom. But it was only one kingdom, and nothing would change beyond the borders of the Asura Kingdom. Gilgamesh, you are far from the central continent, so your authority is weak in this place. You know very well that I respect what you do for other races, but even if you make a change in your lands, it won't change anything beyond that. Ctto was honest with his words and wanted to tell Gilgamesh that any power he had in the Asura Kingdom didn't influence the decisions of other realms. Gilgamesh understood this almost instantly, so he smiled. What if I, as king, conquer the entire central continent? Tell me, would you see a change? A realm led by the elves, directly under my command, capable of producing the highest quality crops, hand-woven clothes, and timber. Perhaps you conquer the entire central continent, but for that, I'd need over 500,000 soldiers, and all of them must be incredibly powerful. I won't cause a massacre, nor will I abuse my power to oppress people from other realms. My goal is unity. I want to unite everyone into a single race, and our objective should be evolution, not killing each other. Ctto felt a chill running through his old bones. His gaze could tell him that Gilgamesh wasn't lying, and he warned, beings like the dragon god or the armored dragon would never allow it. A war like that would plunge all the continents into unprecedented chaos. They're just dragons who have lost their world. What authority do they have to tell a human what to do with the future of the races? Ctto, you know that even after living so many years, those gods are ignorant. You're concerned about slavery within your own species, and you've never done anything. Everyone worries about wars, and nobody does anything. Why should you stop me when I'm actually doing something? Gilgamesh's gaze grew colder as he spoke. That's... Ctto was left speechless, and he didn't know how the conversation had taken this turn, but it was simply stunning. Gilgamesh turned his gaze to Roxy and asked, Dear Roxy, do you think I would lose if I were to fight the dragon god or the ape who calls himself the god of fighting? You wouldn't lose, you would win using only half of your power, and that's already a lot. Lord Ctto, maybe you don't understand, but there were ancient beasts in this place so powerful that even you, as a sword emperor, couldn't defeat them. If we're talking now, it's because we took care of pacifying these beasts, Roxy spoke firmly. Her gaze shifted towards the other elves, and she continued, I dare say that even Eris and I are more than enough to defeat your entire elf retinue. Not to offend, but you are not our rivals. Eris looked at Sarah and said, I can stand by those statements. Gilgamesh smiled, his expression pensive as he said, What if the moon elves swore loyalty to me? In exchange for that, I will allow you to live in this place. From what I understand, you have lived many years in the darkness, so there will be no place more secluded than this. Additionally, if you want, I have a spirit that can teleport your entire territory to an area within this vast land. For what do you need us? Regardless of what you plan for the future, what do you expect from us? Sarah intervened in the conversation this time. I am going to change this world. For that, I need the support of more than half of all living beings in this world. If the moon elves join me, all those elf tribes, dwarves and beast folk could have a peaceful life in this place. Those who want to fight can do so, but this change can only be brought about with my sword, Gilgamesh replied. He smiled and asked, do you believe your clan will accept my proposal? If they are here, they can protect the ancient tree, which is something they are deeply committed to, isn't it? Chapter 145, Something More. That is very difficult to answer with just my words. I would need to discuss it with the elders and make the wisest decision through a vote. Ctto couldn't respond to Gilgamesh based solely on his preferences, but everyone behind them was convinced to accept this kind of agreement without a second thought. Having a unique place where they would all be protected was something they had always dreamed of. Many of the elves had to endure the injustices of slavery and the kidnapping of their brothers and sisters. If they could live in a place like this, they were more than satisfied with that decision in their lives. There wasn't much difference for them living in a closed place compared to the Blue Forest, mainly because they were forbidden to leave after the disaster involving Elaine and her group. For that simple reason, no one else had ventured out in the last 100 years, something they all accepted without being able to do more. But unexpectedly, everyone could trust Gilgamesh, who shared that sentiment unanimously. They all knew very well that the man in front of them was born to rule, and as he considered all the living races in this world, there was no reason not to support his cause and fight for a new world devoid of strife. They have their reasons, and I will respect them, but don't forget that this place will be under my supervision from now on, as I believe that the ancient tree may provide me with an easier way to find a certain being. Gilgamesh spoke these words as he looked at the closed wooden portal and reflected on what he had learned earlier. Thank you for understanding my words. I hope to give you an answer on behalf of the Moon Elves, Ctto said in a courteous tone. I only hope that the Moon Elves do not ally with the human god, otherwise, I will be obliged to exterminate them completely, even ending the lives of their smallest descendants. Gilgamesh's words left Ctto speechless, so he quickly said, we do not serve any god and will never do so, the ancient tree is our only guide in the world, and our duty is in nature. Although I recommend you do not speak so casually about the gods, many powerful beings in this world do not tolerate each other, but they will not overlook someone naming them so easily. Even if they are powerful gods. Gilgamesh smiled and said, if they are intelligent, they can live in peace for millions of years. If they are not intelligent and dare to stop my path, then this world will not need the existence of gods. Roxy silently stared at Gilgamesh. She didn't know if he was joking or not. One should know what a god means in this world, beings as ancient as the ancestors who had lived for thousands of years. People who dare to arrogantly claim they can exterminate such gods were unheard of in this world. Haha! My Gil is invincible. What do those gods have that could stand against Gilgamesh? They are not eternal beings, they have been defeated and many others have died, reincarnated and died again like humans. Roxy nodded and said, in the human-demon war, the god of fighting died in battle against a powerful enemy. In the end, all the gods have lost at least once in their lives. Nowadays, no one knows where the god of fighting, the demon empress, and the dragon god are. I doubt they want to interfere in the human world today. Although with Gilgamesh's abilities, I believe no one can match him. Listening to Roxy's words, Gilgamesh became interested in this god of fighting because if they were in this world, he wanted to know if they were truly a being comparable to that of a god. Well, it would be normal for my future wives to support me in this. But it wouldn't be any fun if I didn't even get a scratch. Gilgamesh said this, though he was very satisfied with his fiancée's stance. As a man, there was nothing better than having the absolute trust of the people you had chosen to have close in your life. It was truly a new feeling, something unique that could only be experienced by being someone formidable. Ctto forced a smile and said, I must send this message back as soon as possible, and you will hear our response when we have decided. But I have one last question before I depart. How do you plan to maintain the security of the gate in this place? I will bring 1,000 troops for now, 3 of my summoned spirits, and around 2,000 recruits to train in this place. There should be no security issues, as at the slightest opening, I will be in this place and will destroy any threat completely. Gilgamesh was direct with his words, he wanted this place to train his subordinates. There were thousands of people who wanted to follow him to become stronger, so there was no reason to turn them away when he could gradually increase his army. Moreover, all those under his protection would have the opportunity to migrate to this place as soon as possible. Ctto, having heard all he needed to know, looked at Gilgamesh and nodded. You will have our response as soon as possible. I hope that by then you can enlighten us with your grand ideas for this place. Gilgamesh nodded, and after watching the moon elves depart, he said, at least they are intelligent. Would you have killed them if they didn't acknowledge your strength? Roxy asked with more calmness. Gilgamesh thought and said, they are elves, after all, their hatred of humans is justified by the slavers. Over the past few years, my people have bought all kinds of slaves, and some have been returned to the forests and villages from which they were taken. Nevertheless, I would have killed them if they had attacked us instead of acknowledging me. Eris said in a cold tone, I had killed that elf bitch who attacked you, wouldn't it have been better to have killed her? If they were truly useful, I would understand why you need them. But they are just elves, do they hold more value than Elaine knowing them? Having control over all the elves on the continents, were those your intentions when you freed them from slavery? Roxy couldn't think of anything else. That's correct. Gilgamesh smiled and said, gaining the people's support is necessary for ruling securely. I don't want to sweep away any enemies that stand in my way afterward, especially when they are so weak. Establishing control over them is more important than starting meaningless wars that will lead me to nothing but massacres. Consider one thing, what will happen if you control the entire central continent and life within those lands is much freer and safer than in other continents. When Eris and Roxy heard this question, they immediately understood what would happen in the other corners of the world. Roxy smiled upon recognizing this astute approach to managing things, but just as she was about to say something, Gilgamesh asked her, by the way, Roxy, what do you think about bringing your people to this beautiful place? Chapter 146, The Situation. That would be complicated, Roxy murmured with a hint of uncertainty on her face. It's not that she didn't love her family, but she couldn't communicate with anyone other than her parents. But after Gilgamesh granted her the ability to communicate telepathically with others when she had never been able to before, it made her feel much more at ease about returning to her village. She was sure Gilgamesh's suggestion was appealing, but she wasn't sure if her parents and the village would accept it. Eris lifted her chin and said, if they don't want to, then it should be enough for your parents to come to the Azura Kingdom. If you were to marry Gilgamesh, I'm sure he wants what's best for you and your family. I don't think they'll agree. They're very set in their ways, and everyone is deeply rooted in the village where they were born and have lived for hundreds of years. Roxy's response was sincere. It would be fantastic if her village could live in such a beautiful place, but she didn't want to force them. She was very happy that Gilgamesh, despite not being very romantic or showing his emotions easily, was an observant man who liked to pay attention to details and protect those around him. His concern for her family was something that proved Roxy right, so she didn't refuse, but she also didn't give a positive answer. Why don't we go to the demon continent, then? Gilgamesh asked with a mischievous smile. He then pointed and said, sooner or later, I'll have to meet my in-laws, they should know that their daughter's future husband is someone extraordinary. Are you so determined to marry me with Eris around? Roxy asked without any shame. Of course, both of you have become important to me, and I have no intention of letting you go no matter what. But I always seek your opinion, I wouldn't be so cruel as to force you into something you disagree with. Gilgamesh was honest with his words. He didn't want forced love, but he also lied a little because he couldn't let go of what he had come to love. Eris smiled, but at that moment, she saw something falling from the sky. What's that? Gilgamesh, who raised his gaze, furrowed his eyebrows slightly and said, beasts, and more beasts. Above their heads, Gilgamesh could perceive a massive figure falling rapidly in their direction, as if trying to crush them in one fell swoop. Roar! Boom! In a matter of seconds, a massive noise erupted, and an unparalleled aura filled the skies. In an instant, a gigantic figure emerged from what seemed to be a spatial rift. A massive, dark-looking beast appeared before them. This beast had the appearance of a gigantic whale with large tentacles protruding from its body. These tentacles were sucking the life out of nature and emitting an eternal darkness that seemed to be increasingly enveloping the surroundings. There was a person atop the whale. The moment it appeared, Gilgamesh grinned triumphantly as he watched the creatures piling up one after another only to be slaughtered. At this point, Roxy and Eris, who were accustomed to this type of scene, immediately boarded the Vimana and distanced themselves from the area, while Gilgamesh slowly ascended into the sky. The pressure being released was so intense that it was suffocating to remain within a 1-kilometer radius. Under this torrential pressure, all creatures were paralyzed in place. The moon elves who were far away were stunned when they saw that figure in the sky, and one of them murmured, a dark creature. Another terrified elf said, it looks like someone is riding on that dark creature. Even the adventurers in the distance started running when they felt that sense of death, and many others, due to the paralysis, were gripped by fear. Run! Suddenly, all living beings within this space began to flee. At this point, many wished they had the gift of flight to escape from this place more quickly. What do we do, Ctto? Sarah exclaimed with a pale expression. We must stop it, but we don't have the strength to do so. Only the Guardian could stand against it, but he's been asleep for over 200 years. We can't wake him just for this, Ctto replied. Roar! The dark creature let out a loud roar, as if trying to cleave the sky and intimidate its enemies. A red liquid began to seep from its body, and the entire verdant place was filled with a crimson hue. In the distance, someone suddenly halted the advance of the dark whale, a man who shone like the sun but whose presence was indifferent to the events happening around him, as if his purpose was simply to observe what that thing was doing. I never thought the seal would open after 200 years. I had to hide like a miserable being during that time, but no more. I won't die of old age in this filthy world. I will bring forth the legions of the abyss to destroy these lands and turn them into a realm of the dark god. When that hollow voice spoke, it seemed as if his existence was a gift from life. At this moment, this beautiful place turned into a hell. Countless creatures were slaughtered, and only those with pure hearts were protected by the ancient tree, giving shelter to hundreds of thousands of beautiful animals that sought refuge in its roots and shadows. Whether they were beasts of 100, 200, or 500 years, whether they were strong or weak adventurers, many were killed without exactly knowing how this feat had been achieved. Dance of the god of the blue forest! Cried an ancient voice that shone with the power of nature and began to completely suppress the darkness being unleashed in the vicinity. A single guardian protecting the gate? The Moon Elves clan is supposed to still be intact, but none of you came to this place when humans were waging a worthy war. None can compare to those humans, who decimated the dark forces and even reached the heart of our world before they died. That was exhilarating, but all of them died shortly after. When Ctto harnessed the pure energy of the ancient tree, half of the open space was shielded by a blazing source of vitality, but that was all it could do. The man covered in black armor looked toward the old moon elf and said, "You're at your limit. When I got trapped in this space after the gate was sealed from the inside, I vented my fury on the remaining humans but never managed to escape from this place. Cursed being corrupted by darkness, you and your unholy filth will surely be cleansed from this world." Ctto, who seemed like a nature god, cared for nothing except fulfilling his duty. However, the man who appeared to have merged with the darkness said, "My name is Alaman, commander of the 1st Battalion of the Eternals, or what you call dark creatures. You will be the first to die after my awakening." Gilgamesh, who had been observing the existence infused with darkness, smiled when he saw enough. "Haha! This is the biggest joke I've seen in all my lifetimes. It turns out you're not formidable at all, you're just dark elves who were lucky not to be wiped out by something you don't even know. I wonder if you serve the cowardly god." When Gilgamesh's voice emerged, hundreds of thick chains emerged in golden ripples, and they all separated Ctto from the dark attraction that was covering his body. Alaman, who had noticed Gilgamesh a while ago, furrowed his brows and asked, "You're a human, much more arrogant than I thought. I suppose killing you quickly would be a mistake to be avoided." Chapter 147, Is that all? Yes, you come from the dark world where any creatures, be they humans, elves, dragons, dwarves, or even sea creatures corrupted by darkness, were banished to that place. But with the death of the other worlds and the loss of existing connections with the ancient tree, you somehow managed to connect your world to this place with the help of the ancient tree. As Gilgamesh spoke these words, his smile was so arrogant that he looked at the dark elf in front of him with utter contempt. There was absolutely no respect in his gaze, as if that insignificant being suddenly meant nothing to him. "You cursed creature, I will slaughter all of your kingdom and crush the homes of your families." Alaman shouted with fury coursing through his veins. Gilgamesh wasn't angered by such a low insult, instead, he revealed a faint smile. With dignity and indifference, he said, "Even if all those at your level want to beg for mercy, I won't grant it when I visit your world. I will completely destroy your star and bury you in the cold void. That's what worthless swine like you and those you live with deserve." The Moon Elves knew Gilgamesh was powerful, beyond their comprehension, but not to the extent of single-handedly rivaling all the darkness hiding behind that portal. Against that immense power, even the thousands of elven warriors didn't have the confidence to survive. While the others couldn't move, Gilgamesh was calmly flying toward the enemy in the sky, who seemed unwilling to move from his position for some reason. You have a bold tone for someone who could easily die at the hands of our god, but I will kill you and take your head back as a trophy." Alaman held a scythe-like weapon and prepared to attack Gilgamesh, but something unexpected happened. "Then I'll let you open the portal. I'm curious to see if you are as powerful as you claim to be. If you can open the portal, I'll wait in this place, and you'll see with your own eyes as I crush all of your kind," Gilgamesh said as he pointed to the portal. "Gilgamesh, we must stop him from opening the portal." Serdian, who was holding back the darkness, shouted in panic upon hearing Gilgamesh's reckless intentions. "You can't always escape destiny, it's better that we deal with these issues now that we have the opportunity." Gilgamesh summoned his golden armor and asked Alaman, "Do you want to try to open the portal?" Alaman, who saw no deceit in Gilgamesh's gaze, nodded. He said nothing more and suddenly appeared over the wooden portal. Serdian, who was about to rush to stop him, sweated so much that he immediately wanted to run and prevent it, but a soft voice said, "Don't interfere with Gilgamesh's plans, you will die if you do." Eris, who was standing in front of the throne on the Vimana, looked at Serdian and reminded him, "If there's something on Gilgamesh's mind, there's no one who can pull him out of those thoughts, not even us would be useful. Now, you will witness something incredible. You are so arrogant that there are no levels to compare you with other humans. I hope you don't regret it once the dark creatures arrive." Alaman cut his hand, and the blood filled the wooden portal, and suddenly, a massive concentration of mana made the earth tremble. Alaman had been studying forbidden ancient texts for years and had learned the dark secrets necessary to carry out his plan. Before him, on the ancient tree wood, he had drawn a runic circle with sacrificial blood, surrounded by a horrifying aura. At each of the cardinal points, he had placed cursed artifacts that would serve as anchors for the portal. Alaman began to recite words in an ancient and forgotten language, words that resonated with ancestral malevolence. His voice was deep and guttural, and his hands shook as he channeled his dark power into the runic circle. As his incantations progressed, the air in the chamber became dense and cold, as if the abyss itself were lurking, eager to enter our world. Gilgamesh, who had been waiting calmly, murmured, "Medusa and Mordred, present yourselves before me." As Gilgamesh's words ended, two figures with an aura that dwarfed the heavens appeared at his side and bowed respectfully. "What are your orders, my lord?" Medusa asked with a calm look, as if the commotion around them didn't concern her. Gilgamesh smiled and said, "I want you to summon Amy to reinforce the surroundings. In a few minutes, a portal will open, and when I'm in battle, I won't pay attention to anything else but that. So, while you do that, Mordred can take care of Eris and Roxy, who are on my Vimana. Do you not need assistance with that?" Mordred wanted to go to the battlefield. "No, just observe." Gilgamesh smiled as he looked at the huge portal taking shape, and as things had come to this point, he unsheathed his weapon, without any restraint. Alaman, who was working on the portal, began to feel a powerful presence behind him, and his body began to sweat with concern, wondering if he could open the portal in time. The runic circle began to glow with a red and ominous light, and Alaman felt a dark, magical force beginning to flow through it. The ground beneath his feet shook as the portal slowly opened, and the sound of inhuman moans and whispers filled the surroundings. Dark creatures from the abyss began to emerge from the portal, at first as indistinct shadows that writhed and contorted before taking shape. They were nightmare monsters, with twisted bodies and malicious, glowing eyes. They crawled out of the portal, filling the place with their malevolent presence. Ha ha ha! 200 years waiting in a lucid and painful dream, but at last, I will ravage this place and crush what I once swore to do. Octopus-like creatures crawled through the sand, emitting ferocious roars, and the huge whales flying through the air did the same. Behind them, beings similar to Alaman appeared, and after emerging from the portal, they saw Gilgamesh, who maintained a smile on his face. "Alaman, it took you 200 years to reopen the gate," shouted a beast man shrouded in darkness. Boom! But at that moment, hundreds of monsters died in a single strike from Gilgamesh's unleashing powerful attacks like lightning that shattered their bodies and ended their lives. Roar! A bloody rain began to pour from the enormous sky whales. They died as easily as if an adult were fighting a baby. No, the outcome of this battle was even less favorable than that. The initial clashes were like an ant facing a giant kilometers tall. Everyone who appeared turned into dark meat paste, torn apart so easily it was terrifying. Roar! The dark creatures themselves roared furiously and rushed at Gilgamesh, who with a single swing of his sword mowed down thousands of enemies. Red marks on Gilgamesh's body began to appear, and as the enemies increased, the brutality of this confrontation intensified. Who is this being? The beings of the society were scared. Many gathered their courage and charged toward Gilgamesh with their most powerful weapons before them. Boom! But at this moment, Gilgamesh was like a warlord in a total frenzy. He didn't use any techniques, he only used his sword and brute force to shred his rivals. On the top of his head, hundreds of golden ripples began to form, hundreds, and eventually thousands shone in a brilliant tone, pointing toward that dark space where thousands of creatures of darkness emerged every 10 seconds like a swarm. Boom! Split in two the enemies, hundreds of thousands of swords began to shoot out like an arrow, infused with a divine power that began to shatter hundreds of thousands of enemies who hadn't fully emerged from the portal yet. It can't be possible. Watching this situation as if it were the end of all existence, Alaman knew he had made a grave mistake by opening the portal to this powerful being. In just a few seconds, Gilgamesh had killed 1,000,000 dark creatures, and his body shone as he appeared near Alaman, staring at him with a look of contempt and said, "Pathetic beings." Boom! With a swing of Gilgamesh's sword, Alaman was sent hurtling back into the portal, followed by Gilgamesh, who was suddenly stopped by annoying creatures that kept coming out in search of their death. Chapter 148, No Mercy. Millions of corpses lay dead, even unable to approach the portal, all of them weaker than ants in Gilgamesh's eyes as he flew halfway through the portal, launching attack after attack with his most powerful treasures, and this continued for several minutes. Moments ago, just the body of a huge whale had been shattered by a sweep of the EA sword in Gilgamesh's hand. If his blows were more powerful, this place would collapse entirely, so he limited his strength to 30% at all times to avoid destroying this precious place. Boom! Rivers of blood formed, emitting a strong smell of decay, and the creatures that had been torn apart on the ground tried to move unsuccessfully. Fatal wounds had left their bodies completely weak, unable to move, let alone emit a sound. Gilgamesh moved at a brutal speed, preventing any creature that wanted to move more than 100 meters from the portal from succeeding. This couldn't be called an invasion, it was a massacre on an unprecedented scale. Ctto, who was witnessing this change, was shocked by the result. He had believed that Gilgamesh was strong, but not as much as he was showing. He had only killed millions of creatures, his speed, strength, and combat performance defied all logic. It can't be. Ctto, seeing how Gilgamesh taunted and didn't let anyone escape, shattered all objectivity in his life. Medusa, who was standing on a flying carriage, looked at the old elf and said, "You must be very confused, even with your age, you've never before seen true battles between people who can rival gods. In his past history, Gilgamesh was a king of heroes, even someone like me couldn't get close to the greatness of that man's past. I can honestly say that there is no one who can match him on the battlefield, even when facing the most powerful in this world. In the demon-human war, there were battles of this kind, but I had never been in the presence of such brutal and bloody ones as these." Ctto felt weak from witnessing such scenes. Medusa, on the other hand, said, "They are our enemies, they want to invade us, so it's normal to kill them all." Boom! 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 Powerful enemy attacks were aimed at Gilgamesh's body, but no matter how many hit him, none could penetrate the defenses of his golden armor. Nothing could break or even scratch his armor, so the idea of harming him slowly faded within the enemy ranks. The weight of Gilgamesh's powerful attacks left huge craters opening in the ground, causing the dark creatures themselves to fall into the disaster and die buried under the debris and earth. This sudden change in the battle surprised all those rushing to this end of the place. No matter how strong Gilgamesh was, he had shown nothing more than his physical abilities and those thousands of swords shooting towards the enemy every second. "You damned heretic!" At this point, Gilgamesh stared at the other end of the portal, which was supposed to lead to another world. His eyes were truly terrifying, much more so than the creatures from the abyss, and he walked step by step towards the portal where dark creatures kept pouring out. Every step Gilgamesh took caused the ground to sink, creating large craters that shook the earth for kilometers around. Right now, under the powerful pressure released by Gilgamesh, none of his supposed enemies could stand in his way for more than 10 seconds because the next moment they were torn apart by the attacks of his mighty sword. Kill him! Feeling that the same situation was about to repeat itself once more, an army on the other side of the portal had prepared in advance, and many powerful forces were heading towards the exit where millions of dark creatures' corpses lay motionless. But when those creatures charged at Gilgamesh, there wasn't a single one that didn't stop in fear at the sight of Gilgamesh's mad gaze while he tore his enemies apart. There was no way to describe it with words, the feeling of being completely trapped in a small box with a ferocious beast could somewhat describe what was happening in the surroundings. Two beings, each 3 meters in size, also felt as if an invincible predator was watching them. Only someone who had killed hundreds of thousands of living beings could emit such terrifying pressure and intent to kill. "You're just a human." A furious voice echoed from deep within the portal, and the two figures observed by Gilgamesh attacked with their fierce weapons. Gilgamesh roared thunderously, "Come all or die like dogs." This time, Gilgamesh rushed towards the portal and passed through it, raising his EA weapon as a powerful concentration of magical energy crashed directly into both enemies. Boom! Boom! This time, space showed signs of breaking. Right now Gilgamesh was reliving the moments when he faced true rivals much stronger than he was and defeated them all. At this moment, his gaze had lost any semblance of humanity, only the desire to kill and destroy remained. The two weapons of the 3-meter-tall beings could not withstand Gilgamesh's onslaught. However, these weapons that clashed with EA could not match its greatness, so they shattered after the first impact. At this moment, Gilgamesh, with his armor, was an invincible being, while his Inkiju chains restrained his enemies before they were killed by sword attacks at an unmatched speed. Under the shock of the clash between the EA sword and those two weapons, the hands of those beings who could easily be sword gods were shattered by the first impact. This caused the 3-meter-tall beings to frown but feel nothing but a flash as a reddish attack split them in half. Boom! At that very moment, a wave of attack came from the depths of the world and headed towards Gilgamesh, who, with just a swing of his sword and the release of energy, split that attack in half. Boom! Gigantic stone giants headed towards Gilgamesh, but with a single swing of the Inkiju chain, these two enormous creatures couldn't move and halted their steps. The golden ripples that began to appear crushed hundreds of thousands of creatures per minute, the swords launched like meteors pierced dozens of enemies before coming to a stop. "How dare you invade my world?" A dignified voice shook the darkness, and Gilgamesh, who was in the midst of killing, stopped, although his ripples kept attacking. "Come and face me. I heard that the people of this world want to invade mine, so I'm just doing the same to you. To me, you're only ants I don't want to deal with in the future, so I'm just taking out the trash." Gilgamesh's voice echoed throughout the world submerged in darkness, causing all the beings of this world to hear him. "You're just like us, a conqueror. We shouldn't feel pity or fear in making an enemy of our level. This is our nature, so seeing that we're both the monarchs of our worlds, let's fight, and the victor will swear not to invade the other's world for 1,000,000 years. The voice speaking stopped at the level where Gilgamesh was flying and revealed its form. "You have a human appearance but have been consumed by the strange energy of this dimension. It's no wonder others don't kill each other having a superior existence like you, although you're still an ant." Gilgamesh smiled coldly and said, "So let's fight, let's see who's stronger, and prepare yourself because I'm going all out. My name is Aletus, monarch of shadows and governor of the world within the darkness," Aletus said as he wielded a sword weighing hundreds of tons. This time, Gilgamesh would fight at full strength. Ever since he could remember, he had stopped underestimating his opponents with considerable strength. He used to do so, which caused significant injuries to his body that affected him in subsequent battles. Let's go. Chapter 149, An Outcome? "You may be worthy, but I'm still not convinced that you deserve to know my name." When Gilgamesh spoke those words, a powerful impact was directed towards him, and with a flick of his sword, he deflected the attack. Aleanus, seeing how Gilgamesh had approached so closely, turned his 2-meter-tall body into a black mist that crashed directly into his enemy. Boom! The moment that black mist touched Gilgamesh, a massive explosion occurred. The black mist was dispersed in just a few seconds, and Gilgamesh continued his attack with his sword, causing shockwaves to split the earth in two and create several craters. Aleanus's expression darkened significantly. He turned his hand to grasp another weapon, attempting to halt the attack from Gilgamesh's sword. This was a priceless treasure that even his defensive treasures couldn't withstand more than 5 times, so he had to be very careful. Boom! 1, 2, 3 clashes, and the superior sword in Aleanus's hands was completely rendered useless. There was no way to stop Gilgamesh with his EA sword in hand and going all out, making him an enemy that shouldn't exist in this kind of reality. When Gilgamesh prepared a powerful attack, the concentrated brute force completely obliterated Aletus's black armor, which he had done everything he could to use as a defense. In an instant, the sound of bones breaking echoed through the air, causing the dark creatures to shudder. If Aletus's armor hadn't protected his body from Gilgamesh's attack, he very likely would have died. "My lord, leave this place. 100 figures appeared in the air, blocking Gilgamesh's path, and they all held a kind of mirror that protected them and their lord behind them. Waves of energy began to turn into shields, blocking any attacks that might be directed their way. At that moment, the creatures also resumed their attacks, launching themselves at Gilgamesh, who had only one thought in his mind, and that was to kill. Unfortunately for them, with a single strike from Gilgamesh, hundreds of thousands of creatures were massacred, and the mirrors that formed to stop him suffered large cracks. Glorious sounds appeared as Gilgamesh simply stood in place, looking down upon these people who supposedly wanted to take the world into their hands. If they couldn't even give him a worthy battle, there was no need to pay so much attention to these dark beings. Gilgamesh, who directed his gaze towards his main enemy, only muttered, "The desperate attempt of a defeated race." But at that moment, a powerful aura collided with Gilgamesh, sending him flying, but only a few seconds later, he crashed headlong into the attacks being launched in combination by many forces. Boom! With just Gilgamesh's impact, the defensive mirrors shattered, and the earth and sky trembled, mountains crumbled, and everyone felt as if a supreme deity had been enraged. Seeing this, not only Aelanus but also Medusa, Eris, and the others who were outside the portal displayed signs of concern in their expressions. What kind of battle was unfolding within the dark world? With just some of his physical attacks, he could make both dimensions tremble, destroying everything in his path as if an earthquake wouldn't stop shaking for more than 5 minutes. As for Aelanus, who witnessed this scene, he felt fear for the first time in thousands of years and wanted to run towards a rune where dark-colored gemstones were shining. "We will stop you." The dark beings that stood in front of Gilgamesh felt fear and roared deafeningly. Their energy forces formed a single, powerful attack in the shape of a spear that could kill any enemy, but Gilgamesh, who was flying in the sky, only smiled arrogantly. Boom! In that moment, powerful flames erupted from one of Gilgamesh's swords, as if they wanted to consume the entire world. Seeing his main enemy trying to escape, how could Gilgamesh let him go as if nothing had happened? Now pointing his EA, Gilgamesh gritted his teeth and said, "Die, all of you. Enuma Elish." Boom! After that shout, Gilgamesh unleashed his full power against all those who were his enemies. The sky, the earth, and the air seemed to freeze in the face of the powerful vibration in the surroundings. Under the banner of Gilgamesh's most potent technique, this attack reflected all the pent-up fury of the battle that was escalating. His heightened senses, his battle frenzy, and his killing intent were released without restraint. In the blink of an eye, a crimson aura blanketed the entire dark world, making even those fighting instinctively think they might have gone a bit overboard. An attack from a god. As soon as all the dark creatures saw the impending attack, every conscious being lost the will to keep fighting. All living beings had lost their fighting spirit, and the world itself and the dimension were too close to Gilgamesh's attack, feeling only a sense of impending death. Boom! In an instant, when Gilgamesh's Enuma Elish attack was released from EA under Gilgamesh's control, a terrifying power passed through all the enemies, disintegrating them without exception. Gilgamesh's mighty attack erased billions of dark creatures that had been plaguing for thousands, tens of thousands of years in the darkness, from existence. Even in the first few seconds of Gilgamesh's attack, the very dimension began to collapse, and the dark world showed signs of falling apart, with the damage slowly spreading. Boom! A few seconds more, Aelanus watched as his body was disintegrated, as the dark world, the prison of all living beings that had perished in the destruction of the worlds, was pierced by the aura of that monster who had come seeking its destruction. Though this attack lasted only about 30 seconds, it was more than enough to pierce the planet and collapse the portal connecting the dark dimension with the world from which Gilgamesh came. Suddenly, every living being inside and outside the dimensional gate felt as if their souls were trembling and their spirits were being shattered. Their bodies grew cold, as if they had been touched by death itself. Crack! Having cracked the planet, Gilgamesh was sure it would eventually collapse, so there was no need to continue expending energy in this place. All of this had happened so quickly, so suddenly, that no one could even attempt to escape. It was as if they had been erased from existence in an instant, as if a mighty hammer had crushed them relentlessly. In the blink of an eye, the powerful explosion that was consuming the world spread on a massive scale, sweeping away absolutely everything. At that moment, Gilgamesh shone with a golden light in the air, his gaze remarkably calm as he observed this incredible sight, feeling for just a few seconds like his past self, the one who exterminated his enemies ruthlessly and without saying a word. It was necessary. Those were the only words that came out of Gilgamesh's mouth as he killed so many dark creatures that he didn't care at all where they came from, but using his ability to see the future, he wanted to at least understand what drove this place and what it was exactly. In just a second, information enough to overwhelm hundreds of thousands of people flooded Gilgamesh's mind, and after learning what he wanted to know, he flew toward the closing portal. Boom! Just as Gilgamesh was about to leave this place, a creature resembling a cat flew towards him, and he immediately caught it in his hands. Looking at the tiny creature he held, he was surprised by what it was. However, for obvious reasons, he exited this place before anything else could happen. After all, he had won this battle. Before passing through the gate, Gilgamesh looked at the dark dimension and said, "Even if they aren't worthy enemies, daring to invade a peaceful world not only disrupts my plans but also my future life. Even if they were merely seeking to survive on instinct, they must die, and that's the only thing they need to know." After these words, Gilgamesh took a step forward and disappeared from the place, passing through for a few seconds before it closed completely, leaving that dimension entirely forgotten. Chapter 150, A Collapse. When Gilgamesh emerged from the portal, everyone, including Medusa, trembled upon feeling that thick murderous intent that not even an entire army of death could possess. That uncontrollable fury filled his body, making him aware that once he starts fighting with the intent to exterminate, nothing could stop him. The moment the portal closed, Ctto, who had witnessed everything, bowed and said, "Lord Gilgamesh, I can say with absolute certainty that no one in the Blue Forest will oppose moving to this dimension. If you are willing to accept us, the Moon Elf clan swears loyalty to you." Gilgamesh cast a glance at the old elf and asked, "Can you speak for all the elves?" "I am a great delegate, I will bring back all this information, and I am more than certain that everyone will be more than willing to swear loyalty. There is no doubt, as you have freed us from a burden that very likely would have ended our existence." At this moment, Gilgamesh seemed like an evil god, exuding an uncontrollable aura, causing everyone to stagger uncontrollably. No one dared to look him in the eyes. However, at that moment, only two people out of all present met his gaze, and they were Eris and Roxy, who looked at him with smiles full of happiness for seeing him safe and sound. The other elves in the distance who had been brought here by Medusa were all afraid to meet Gilgamesh's gaze. No one could believe that a human could possess such unimaginable power, as he had just demonstrated a few seconds ago, acting as if he were possessed by an evil spirit, turning into a ruthless and brutal man. Finally, everyone understood that when Gilgamesh was being arrogant, it wasn't because he was foolish and ignorant, but because he was a powerful being, and he always knew he was a fierce giant who could not be restrained by anyone in this world. The elves shivered as they saw millions of dark creatures filling the battlefield like mountains, blood forming into thick lakes, and even more corpses of beings who had once been humans, elves, beastmen, and dragons. Many elves felt relieved to have ended on good terms with this man. Otherwise, they would have been massacred as well. "We should go." Finally, Gilgamesh only said these words. Medusa, who was nearby, dared not say anything more, and she summoned a massive carriage. While the Vimana entered the gate of Babylon, all those closest to him left the area, leaving the elves still frozen and uncertain of how long it would take for them to move. Did everyone see that? That man is much more powerful than a god, a ruthless and brutal being who exterminated millions of dark creatures. After Gilgamesh left, an elf jumped with excitement for having witnessed such power. The other elves felt their legs go weak, and many sat on the ground, looking at the millions of dark creatures lying in a river of blood. Remembering Gilgamesh's expression during his massive battle, they couldn't help but tremble. That human was unrivaled and incredibly powerful, surpassing even his arrogance. His aura earlier was unstoppable, not even the dragon god could have halted him. Why is that man so terrifying? Is he a human, or has he actually lived for hundreds of years? A knowledgeable elf replied, "He's Prince Gilgamesh, so he shouldn't be more than 13 years old, but his body is that of an adult human. So why does he have that body?" Ctto, who had been silent throughout this time, looked at the others and said, "His small body doesn't do justice to his true combat abilities, so he must have found a way to make his body grow. Although I'm sure he's someone who has incarnated in Prince Gilgamesh's body, his abilities and that murderous intent are only from someone who has been on the battlefield numerous times." A moon elf shook his head and said, "So do you think he has any other intentions besides improving the human world? His goals shouldn't be that simple, knowing he's someone who incarnated from another world, am I wrong? Maybe he was a man who loved humans, we can't understand it, and we never truly will." Sarah stepped forward and said, "We need to get going. We must report what we've seen to the High Council and make preparations to give Gilgamesh a satisfactory response to our decision. If he's going to change the world, we should follow him and be part of that new future. Serdian concluded these words as he told everyone to depart. At that moment, Gilgamesh returned to the ancient tree and entered a puddle to clean the blood off himself. Roxy helped him by tossing small warm water balls, and the dried blood on his armor began to fall off. Eris was unusually quiet, as she had nothing to say. After some thought, she asked, "How strong was that final enemy?" Gilgamesh pondered for a moment and replied, "If I had to guess, I'd say he was at about 45% of my strength. If he had had treasures that matched my weapon, the fight might have lasted a bit longer. It was undoubtedly something very important." "Eris and I could never have helped you," Roxy said, still visibly shaken by the battle she had witnessed, which only gods could have triggered. "Even though it was beyond your current limits, you won't take long to be able to match such powerful opponents," Gilgamesh reassured them, trying to be his usual self despite suffering some of the after effects of the previous battle. "Do you want to hear a funny story?" Gilgamesh asked as he removed his upper body armor. "Oh." This piqued Eris's interest, who felt a little down about her own lack of strength in the face of powers she could never hope to match. "So, what will happen if Gilgamesh ever needs help?"
Thanks for listening.